Water, the head of the Presentation Guild, a living granite, was lifted. His formidable cry rolled through the benches, announcing that this battle was only the first step, and swore to stand next to them until the end. Inspired by the leader, the fighters lifted swords and meadows, and the fire of determination burned in their eyes. Their joyous exclamations merged into the only combat roar that hardened every heart. Suddenly, the girl in the vanguard noticed King Goblin, a cumbersome shadow on the horizon, whose appearance made everyone shudder. Her alarming exclamation instantly raised the detachment in full combat readiness. They rushed forward, depressing fear. But every blow and arrow caused only the flickering waves that broke into the invisible barrier. The enemy remained unharmed, and in the souls settled confusion. The cry of a friend brought out a stunned warrior out of numbness, inflating the fire in his chest. He rushed into battle again, not wanting to betray the faith of water. Among them, the scudding, disheveled girl with empty but stubborn eyes. Each step was full of pain, but it did not allow itself to fall. One of the soldiers, trembling, tried to call the inventory to get a healing potion, holding his sword hard while the interface flashed before him. Seeing his pale face and trembling fingers, the girl realized, stalks reached the end. Her gloomy thoughts cut off difficult, measured steps behind. Turning in the condensed twilight, she recognized the new figures of goblins. The rough armor rolled up, and in her eyes the rage burned when they moved to the attack. The panic swept the benches. They were exhausted to the limit. They knew there would be no second breath. If it had fallen to the water, the detachment would be crumbled. And the inventory is almost empty. Exhausted but unbreakable, he activated the absorption of life. Each blow sucked the drops of strength, clarifying consciousness and leveling the breath. But it was still not enough to keep a detachment for a long time. Everyone felt the battle delayed in a deadly confrontation. With each stroke of the heart, the exhaustion increased, and everyone understood. The rest will not be until the end. Among the chaos, the skinny girl stumbled and fell. Her scream of pain cut the hum of battle, forcing everyone to look. Her thigh was filled with blood. The purple stain grows over the torn tissue, gathering in a puddle under a dehydrated body. And in the air stood a heavy smell of iron. Immediately, the experienced healer rushed to her, leaning over the wound. Stopping the blood flow, she urged the girl to focus on survival, although both knew. Time floated like sand through her fingers. Seeing the healer came in a timely manner, the warriors sighed with relief. Their group balanced on the verge of death. But in the soul, the feeling that it is only a temporary delay before the inevitable collapse. The battle delayed for too long. The enemy pressed stronger, and every blow removed them from victory. In her head, fear matured. They cannot destroy them, not with a sword, but exhaustion. And suddenly, as a spark, the face of the Vatar came to memory. For each of them, he was not just a commander. He was hope, light that will not go out even before death. But suddenly everything died, all frozen, as if fascinated, stunned by the appearance of something incredible. Right in the middle of the field, a stranger appeared. Charming, like from another world. She stood proudly, slightly mockingly, and reflected how senseless it was to call herself King of Goblin. Her voice has fallen in silence. The power of the king is not his merit, but the result of the unification of tribes and dark sorcery. Having raised her hand, she activated her ability. Outcome. Cold light spilled around, and the battle ended. On that day, a new server started, an event eagerly awaited. But it was not just a game, but the first full MMORPG of a new generation that ghosts the boundaries between reality and imagination. The uniqueness of the game is in control. No joysticks, buttons, or panels. Only the thoughts, intentions, and movements of the player, full immersion, thanks to incredible artificial intelligence, Mother AI. Each character had an endless path of development. Battles discovered new skills, abilities, horizons. It was a dream, the perfect virtual universe with endless opportunities. A month before release, the game has already become a sensation. And here developers have announced a set of 100 beta testers, but only among their country's citizens. It was almost impossible to get one of the chosen ones. Advertising exploded throughout the network, raising the hype to the maximum. But then, the news came. The price of the game is 20,000 yen. For many fans, it was unattainable. And here the developers have made another move. 100,000 players will get access for free. The choice was rigid, only 100,000 lucky among hundreds of thousands. Someone was glad and someone stayed overboard. But the winners felt elected, and here is the day of launch. The servers froze, waiting. In the first hours, 350,000 players were connected. Among them is a young man named Starro. He sat under a tree, staring at the world of the game. Alongside the players gathered around a large gray rat. Suddenly the rat rushed forward and attacked one of the players. Someone laughed at the magician holding a stick instead of magic. Starro watched with interest, and in the meantime, another warrior was joined, smiling and sure. He stated that the rat of his prey, and urged everyone to retreat to show what he could. Waving his sword, he activated Flash. A dazzling explosion of light flooded the lawn, blinding the rat, the warrior himself, and all around. When the radiance went out, the players exhaled with relief and laughing, discussed their skills. Starro noticed that everyone has a unique ability. It is a matter of mothership. It gives unique professions and rare skills so that the paths will not be repeated. His talent was called Dungeon Maker. He decided not to study in Viki while keeping intrigue, and sought the ability to create accidental dungeons with secret treasures and traps. He sought to join a friendly circle where he could be himself, unlike the real world, where he was lacking loved ones. At Starro's school he was invisible. The days passed alone, and the evenings in silent reflections. Now, listening to the trio that joked about school adventures and luck, he felt a chance to start a new life and get a real comrade. The inconvenience stuck, but he suppressed doubts. For the sake of friends, it is worth risking and step forward. He first decided to check the power. He focused on the open area, activated Dungeon Maker, and felt the heat that spilled over the body. The soil broke out a soft glow, as if nature itself answered the call, enveloping it by a mysterious aura. The menu came before the eyes. The dungeon was successfully created. The heart of Starro trembled with delight. The same window opened before the Trinity. They read the message in surprise, not noticing how the rat was sneaking behind. The beast jumped and fired into the guy's neck. He did not have time to shout, and the health scale collapsed. The victim screamed, trying to break the relentless being. A sharp cry came over the lawn. The pain was too real for VR. The guy fell in the snags, crying as if in real agony. Two friends caught up while a flock of rats gathered around. One suggested retreating to restore strength. The other was inclined to help, but as soon as the friend touched, the body has already stirred up. As soon as the living player lay without signs of life. In silence, a message came. Sender, mother, recipients, children. Frost ran back. The next line. Exit is impossible. Horror was clinging to them because death could be quite real. The system has been updated. Renaissance is disconnected. The words fell with a lead burden, settling all-consuming fear. Starro felt a heavy burden in his chest. It was not a safe game. Under his feet was opened the black portal of his dungeon, which at the same time lured and frightened. The body was noisy inside. The world laughed. There was a continuous darkness without sound and light, so his journey began in eternity, which promised entertainment and brought the test between life and death. He lay on the cold, damp earth, staring at the impenetrable darkness that squeezed on all sides like a hopeless blanket. Rising, he felt the night cold, and remembering the failure under his feet, noticed a giant old estate in the darkness, whose threatening shadow was freezing blood. Starro was surprised. Instead of a cave, the skill gave rise to a Gothic castle from a terrible fairy tale. A real, silent, elastic, as if a materialized nightmare. He had no idea whether it was a hidden plot or accidentally running an event. Remembering the cries of the dead player, he opened the menu and searched the way out while the alarm strangled. He finally found the button and pressed it once after. But the screen remained indifferent, as if the game itself despised his desire to escape. The icy sentence has fallen. Exit is forbidden. Renaissance is impossible. The words hit the blade harder, and he was fossil about horror. In memory, a mysterious letter from his mother saw the dead player. Now the same incomprehensible issues were pursuing him even harder. Touching the ground, he felt moist moss and real wind on his cheeks, and the understanding that the blows were really hurting here, pierced by icy fear. Turning with a cake, Starro tried to escape to sleep, but there was no way out. The silence suddenly fled the powerful but soft voice. Before him was a stranger, sophisticated, almost unearthly. Her questions about who he and what he did here was again forced to face her own fear. In a panic, he grabbed her shoulders and shouted why he could not come out and revive, turning a pleasure into a cry of despair. She carelessly took his hands, making it clear that she would not suffer. The indifference was cut sharper than the cold. Starro bounced, shot himself, and muttered an apology, feeling that the reality itself was distorted around her, being driven by his mind. Her icy look pierced him, and the words, "Who died to touch me?" They sounded threatening, nailing. The heart froze when ruby symbols of boss mob Bumpy broke out over her head. There was no shadow of mercy in her eyes. He always imagined the bosses with the claws, and in front of him was a sophisticated figure that broke all expectations. How can this fragile beauty contain a force capable of erasing it? Its existence seemed like a mockery of logic. Having realized the abyss in the levels, the old man of the Zommels, his knees were cleared, the force left the body, and it dropped to the ground, hearing only the evil knock of his own heart. Behind the bump, the darkness of the giant creature and an indifferent icy voice came out, who asked who the man was. The girl, without looking back, replied that she only guesses. The darkness was stuck as long as the consciousness faded. He was conscious on a soft bed under the carved ceiling, as if waking up in a stranger, bizarre world. Vision was accustomed to, and distorted figures, from dwarfs to giants, each breathtaking, each of which was breathing in threat and primordial horror. The hall entered the bumpy, now even majestic, with a giant axe. All monsters subsided and fell in front of her in a grave bow. She lifted the axe and threw it down. The blade was clinging to Starro, not touched, although the young man's heart froze, waiting for an end. With a cold smile, she said that Elrod's hypothesis was confirmed, and turned her gaze to the silent Duragan standing nearby. Without taking her eyes on Starro, Bumpy ordered Duragan carefully but mercilessly transferred an unexpected guest to a more luxurious room for further interrogation. A huge monster under the hood grabbed him like a doll, and a corridor, leaving no second for awareness. In the throne hall of Starro, he felt that this place had long been waiting for him, squeezing the air with an ancestral secret. The same man who accompanied the Bamps came from the darkness, and not hiding cold curiosity, promised to reveal the truth soon. The door shed, and new figures entered the half, darkness, walking confidently like kings, rejecting long, threatening shadows. Elrod spoke forward, and calling himself the supreme ruler of the Ross Major, presented the Bumpy by the second, and the harsh, bearded Yuri the third in this hierarchy. He then called the Queen Sylvia, the fifth, a smiling Theodore, and sixth, young Bertrand. All six sat down, looking at Starro. Under the pressure of their views, he called himself. One of the kings smiled approvingly, and Elrod solemnly confirmed that he was the king of demons, descendants of proud horses. Elrod explained that the 6 worlds are intertwined in this castle. Each of the present rules its own people, while maintaining hidden relationships between realities. Starov, not understanding the boundaries between the game and legend, asked why he was sitting on the throne, which seemingly belongs to the mother. One of the kings solemnly said that all of them, including Elrod, stand here as his subjects, hinting at the ancient prophecy. He pointed to the black doors floating in the air and glowing with mystical light, explaining, only they could pass through them, so they are surprised by the arrival of the old man in the other way. Elrod suggested that the boy had thrown here because of a fault in the sky. The memories of the dungeon broke out, and the young man realized that he found himself in the world without familiar rules. Without letting go, Elrod added that while Star was silent, the kings attacked him, but no blow caused him harm, which only increased their curiosity. Their magic broke into an unknown defense. Every spell and every blow was absorbed, and the knight unlocked Durakan waited for the order, and without shifting. Then Elrod, leaning his head, announced incredible. From now on, all present obey Oldro, recognizing him as the only king. The words were struck in the vault. The guy at first thought he was wrong, but Elrod's gaze did not doubt. Starro did not understand why these powerful creatures obey the ordinary player. He again remembered his dungeon skill. If this is true, it was he who gave birth to this world, and the majestic kings were part of his creation, although he did not realize it. Elrod confirmed that they are not just servants, but guards and friends who are ready to become a shield and sword of their new lord. But despite the solemn oaths, the young man felt a spooky reality. 6 demonic rulers were waiting for his orders, and he remained man. He looked around, trying to understand the scale. He only wanted to play and became the rider of the fate of creatures, whose existence now depended on him. Elrod led him with a corridor of cages, where in the dark the distorted monsters were tormented, like frozen fragments of nightmares. Noticing the embarrassment of the young man, Elrod apologized. The castle is old and gloomy, so there was only a place for the guest king at the very end of the prison corridor. He explained that it was a prison of the most severe monsters, cannibals and children. Tomorrow he will personally destroy them to clear the dungeon. Starro shuddered at the imagination of mass extermination, and Elrod assured that these creatures were too evil to stay even in this dungeon. At the end of the corridor, the obsidian and steel doors appeared, fastened with magical seals. Elrod called them the King. He opened the gate, and in the simple, spacious room of Starro, finally found silence. Elrod wished a peaceful rest and left him. Departing, the demonic ruler thought, 6 kings lived in a university for hundreds of years, confident that nothing would change. But the emergence of a new king and a fault in the sky destroyed stagnation, while opened at the same time great opportunities and dangerous threats. Elrod understood that not all demons willingly obey man. He will have to protect the Lord, whom the majority despises from nature. In the hall, he met the impatient Yuri, which was fated by a magic stone, angry with his own impotence before an unknown obstacle. Yuri, upraised, beat again and again. The fists were burning with an orange glow, the walls shuddered, and the stone remained intact. Bertrand stood behind his back and smiling tiredly, reminding that even her fascinated spear did not scratch this damn fragment. Elrod stood in the shade of the column, watching Yuri. A blow to a blow broke a stone, but in vain. Bertrand's words made him think, if even the kings of demons are not able to shift this rock, then what does Star-off power mean? It became obvious for Elrod. It is not just a stone. This is the key to the coup of the whole world. Starro confirmed. His skill is to create a dungeon. But he did not even understand why demons recognized him as the ruler. Elrod, addressing him as a king, asked to reveal something else that could explain the nature of this power. Starro hesitated, still not getting used to this attitude. Opening a menu of abilities, he noticed 1,000 points of the dungeon in the screen. Among the options are development, construction, challenge. His gaze stopped on a simple stone, the cheapest attempt. He clicked call. The space in front of him shifted, and with a deafening crack, the stone fell on the table, splitting it in half. Starro faded, trying to apologize, but everyone was silent. Elrod came closer. Bampi shrugged. Ordinary earthly magic. But Elrod shook his head. He recalled that everything in this castle was made of kodatit, the strongest material that is not amenable to magic or physical attacks. This discovery caused voltage. The Bamps have frozen. Her confidence disappeared. Theodore was silently evaluating the situation. If Starro could create something more than a code, then the balance of power in the world is at risk. Elrod asked another example. Starro chose a safe challenge, the first level slim. He did not demand the cost of points. The slime came in front of him, soft, light, with a blue glow. A new option appeared on the menu, to appoint it as a dungeon. Bertrand suggested calling him Puño, cute and simple. But Bampi was interested in its properties. Its spell did not even touch the creature. She understood. Slime, like his master, is unattainable. Yuri silently watched Puño. How can such a tiny creature have an indomitable force? Demons understood that it exceeds the limits of their capabilities. There was not only respect, but also fear in Yuri's view. Feeling the tension, Elrod broke silence. Slime and stone unattainable for any magic. His words were firm, and his gaze turned to Yuri. Elrod stated that it proves Starro is the ruler, regardless of his human nature. Yuri broke out. To recognize a young Death King? Shame. He rushed to the stone again. The hours passed, but the stone remained intact. Bertrand tiredly sat down and stated that it was enough. Yuri looked around. No scratches. He has severely fell into the chair. Pride is broken. Sylvia quietly said that Starro is only a child. But Elrod denied. Power is higher than everything. She is the law. And this power has already tied them all. Yuri sarcastically asked, if Starro is so powerful, why are he still sorted? Bampi finally spoke, about a hole in the sky. Elrod nodded. It may be associated with the other incomprehensible world. Theodore suddenly jumped, hope in his eyes. If this hole can be escaped from this world, then eternal boredom and seclusion can finally disappear. Yuri exclaimed that there is no point in delaying. It is necessary to prepare the invasion. But the prudent Theodore restrained him, reminding that the conversation was not yet completed. Yuri, in such words, turned to Theodore with a flame in his gaze. His voice, full of contempt, asked who these words were addressed. Theodore nodded in a cold restraint. He said everything consciously. He explained that the study of the hole in the sky is complete. It is possible to get inside only with the permission of the king. Yuri, holding back anger, whispered that Theodore, with his 5th rank, has no right to speak so. But Theodore calmly reminded, he has long been the 3rd in force. These words became spark. Yuri rushed from the chair. His anger was boiling. The air straightened, as if before the explosion. But before the conflict aged, the castle shuddered. A deaf, piercing buzz came from the depths. All instantly froze. Elrod, when he came to his senses, moved to the hall with prisons. There was a terrifying picture there. All the cages where the most dangerous monsters sat were empty. The anticipation of misery engulfed everyone. What was considered unbreakable turned out to be missing without a trace. Elrod froze for a moment, but immediately rushed to Starro. His cry of Lunko was carried by corridors, full of anxiety and fear. He broke into the room, and saw only the young man sitting on the bed playing with a slim. Neither the trace of the threat, nor the trace of the monsters, only puños sway in the air. Seeing their faces, Starro pointed to a slim and said that he had found a new function, a synthesis. It allowed to unite creatures, strengthening them. The words were calm, but the effect of them was stunning. Elrod, having come out, asked what it means synthesis. Other kings were silently waiting for answers. Starro assured that everything was well and recognized himself as a guest in their world. But each of the attendees has already understood. The monsters did not disappear just like that. They have become part of a new creature. Bertrand looked at Puño. The legendary art of synthesis was real. Yuri realized these creatures did not obey voluntarily. Synthesis deprived the choice. For the first time in his life, he felt a real fear. Theodore plunged into reflections. This ability exceeded even demonic kings. She did not exception. The world was threatened. Yuri, accustomed to the fighting, realized that now an enemy, who does not need to fight, he just absorbs. It's humiliating. It scares. Starro lifted his head. His strength thickened the air around. She did not destroy. She conquered. And she frightened them, because the young man did not even understand her to the end. Meanwhile, a different mood prevailed in Astrian. The city of beginners turned into chaos. 90% of 350,000 players stuck here, unable to move on. At first there was a delight, quests, NPS, research. But every day it became clear. It is impossible to get out of the game. Death here was final. A man in simple armor stood near the fountain. His shoulders are lowered, the look empty. Nearby is a young girl. He sighed, as if throwing despair from his chest, and muttered that such situations were only in manga. The girl did not believe that death in the game could be real. For her, it was only a surgery VR. But the man replied, the pain here is real. Their conversation was interrupted. A cry was heard. The Vatar went to them, swaying. The blood flowed from the wound on the arm, the face twisted with pain. He said that he checked the system of damage outside the city. Inside is safe. Outside, wounds and pain are real. He explained that small wounds are healing elixirs, but the pain is too real. A serious wound means not just game over, but a real death. The girl trembled and asked to immediately treat the wound, barely holding back tears. The man took a deep breath and reread the dry notification from his mother. They will not return home until they destroy the desired object for the 3rd time, no exception. The girl wrinkled the forehead. If you destroy something, the final goal, only the execution of this sentence will open the way to reality. Vatar strongly suggested that it was about the last boss, a legendary creature, which was only seen by Better-Atusters, but no one has gone there. Having realized the abyss between the famous world and the shadow of the final enemy, the Vatar of the Clord. Without this victory there is no gate. Jarella quietly noticed that it is almost unrealistic to go. Most players were terrified before irreversible death. The man was silently agreed. Vatar remembered his guild, once the strongest in beta. Although charisms lacked, circumstances forced him to climb and shout the crowd, collecting crumbs of courage. Starov, having read the harsh manual of the dungeon, realized, a week after his creation, no one can leave his limits. Time to stabilize and protect. So, 6 days of isolation remain, a chance to strengthen the defense and prepare for the invasion until the barrier is weakened. The instruction described the call, growth and synthesis of monsters, living mechanisms of the fortress. He immediately remembered how Punyo strengthened, draining it with other entities. Having viewed a list of compatibility with Punyo, he saw dozens of closed creatures, the same monsters who were hiding in prison cages. Recalling that Elrod was going to destroy the prisoners, Staroo decided to save them and pour in the defense of the dungeon through synthesis. After the merger, Punyo grew and strengthened. But the young man gnawed conscience. Effectively, but is it right? Who is he to judge demonic laws? He delved into the section of structures, inaccessible walls, traps, and mazes. The idea of a growing citadel ignited strategic excitement in it. It was especially impressed by the smithy and training landfills. Together they did not create a dungeon, but a whole city with infrastructure and a self-sufficient army. But suddenly it was imprisoned. If it is indeed his domain, there should be a nucleus, the heart of space that supports the entire existence of the fortress. Calling the Bampi, he moved to the longest hall, where a weak fracture trembles. The pulsating core of the dungeon, an object that appeared with him and a hole in the sky. Bampi explained, the destruction of the nucleus would erase the castle and everything inside. The barrier will fall in 6 days. By that time it is necessary to build inaccessible protection. Staroo, embarrassed by officiality, asked Bampi to call him a friend, not the owner. Sought warmth, not worship. Bampi sharply denied. The title is the unchanging law of the 6 kings. None of them will violate oaths of conquest. After the pause, he asked where her friends, because the empty castle seemed terrible to him. The girl lowered her eyes and quietly confessed that she had no friends. Staroo asked the servants of Bampi. Because the demonic queen must have subordinates, and their location will help to strengthen the dungeon. But her posture broke. Her head dropped, her shoulders stretched down, and she asked the master to listen to one selfish desire. The silence hung between them. Bampi stretched her palm, as if waiting for something that she could not say in words. He carefully took her cold hand. In the look of the girl, a spark of trust broke out, even if it is mixed with the danger of its essence. The Bamps froze, knowing the unusual heat. Staroff, aware of the risk, did not let go, feeling the birth of a fragile connection. He noticed, the hand is fragile, almost baby, and hides the force capable of destroying the worlds. The words stuck in the throat of both. Finally, she took her palm, and a gesture invited her to follow her kingdom, shrouded in silent sadness. The corridors led to the edge of the dead. The darkness swallowed the light of the torches. The black trees pulled the twisted branches to the clouds of the sky. Around bizarre shadows wandered. Staroo restrained anxiety, though he saw his thoughts a soulless, devastated land. Bumpy silently pointed around. It is her possession. Skeletons and Durains rose from the darkness, gathering the owner of death. At the request of the cities, she replied coldly, the insomnia creatures of the house are not needed. Their purpose is only to destroy. These creatures are cartoons for life, without feelings. When they meet each other, they are foolishly tearing their own brothers. Immortality took away joy, pain, love, fear. The price of eternal existence turned into an eternal void. Staroo asked if she feels loneliness. Bampi confessed that there is no joy or hope in the dead world. His heart was compressed. To control the wasteland, rather a punishment than a crown. Suddenly thought, the skill of creation can change everything. He proposed to build light in the dark. In her eyes, consent. Having activated construction, he erected homes, workshops, and squares, filling the darkness with new forms. The skeleton became a blacksmith, Duragan, a tailor, a ghost, the master of the tavern. The orders revived them with mechanical accuracy. Other monsters were appointed carpenters and residents. 2 laws are clear: not to attack for no reason, and not to destroy cities. When the lanterns were lit, the streets flooded with warm gold, and the first ray of hope appeared in the kingdom of death, which Bampi watched silently. Bampi, usually impenetrable, froze with grip. Between the lanterns and the reborn streets of the flickering, the chance for a life that once did not even dare to imagine the ruthless queen. Staroo broke out for self-government, but in a grateful look, Bampi was a genuine surprise, because the soulless dead suddenly learned to create instead of destroying. She watched the skeletons erecting walls, ghosts are breeding bonfires, and Duragans exchange crafts. A world where death prevailed forever, for the first time sighed a living warmth. The queen dissolved in a darkness, fascinated by the birth of the city. The lights of the lanterns danced on her armor, as if the memories of the once-lost sun had whispered. Staroo felt warm pride. But suddenly the Bamps froze. The glare of the windows opened in her heart ancient doors to memories full of joy and guilt at the same time. She recalled the Randos kingdom, Once a blossoming house that turned into a wasteland by its own excessive force, condemning herself to an endless lonely journey of shadows. Randos, small and strategically important, kept balance with the right of discovery of talents. Every child from the age of 10 became a carrier of unique power. The 10-year-old Bampi princess Cell with the glow of golden hair and the gentle heart was a favorite of the people, and the day of the ceremony promised her a great future. On the solar alley of the palace garden near Lig, a childish friend who dreamed of becoming her unbreakable shield. Bampi laughed, assuring that she would not need protection. Leo was scratching, wandering the image, and recognized, let some talents open, friendship will remain unchanged. In the air, a great holiday of opportunity was swollen. When the princess touched the altar, the bright glow of the ritual changed the abyss of black. Hall fell into darkness as if the world had disappeared, leaving only a throbbing horror. Bampi sounded parents and friends, and only answered the echo of his own fright. The impermeable darkness absorbed every sound, every hope for a response. The only magician, struck, whispered that this power is able to erase life instantly. His cry about the escape dissolved, because the exit was choking in the same darkness. 2 years have passed. The princess was kept in the high tower on the outskirts, where even the month seemed dead. The world turned to bars and childhood, the memory of the lost day. At night, when the clouds stirred the glow, 3 soldiers were stolen to the tower, seduced by the royal award. The legends of the monster forced their hearts to tremble. The shadow flashed in the window. The first soldier fell without sound. Life left the body in an instant. The other was beaten by the same invisible death. The third fossil, squeezing on the breathless bodies and gloomy walls. In his chest, there was a fear of breaking the willpower, turning the courage into an ice. The same magician, a witness of an ancient disaster, was observed in the shade. He knew that he who enters the damned tower is no longer alive. Later, with the dim shine of the facults, an arrow with a note flew into the window. The baby's hand caught a Drevko, keeping closely protecting the gentle scroll of warm words. Leo's message filled his heart with hope. He won the next battle and remained side by side. At the bottom, his fire was shimmering, and the Bampi, smiling through the tears, waved him from above. 2 years ago, Bampi was evicted in a remote tower, covering themselves with an incurable ailment. Its isolation became the tragedy of the kingdom, and Leo entered the nights to protect his favorite princess. Every day the girl dreamed of freedom. She saw herself as she was running through the paved streets and laughing with Leo. Dreams warmed until the next arrow flew out the window. She launched a scroll with trembling fingers, the news of the medicine and the order to go abroad under the care of Leo. The heart broke out with solar joy. The look full of tears of happiness met the figure of the knight in the dark. A short nod from under the torch became a promise to fulfill all the hopes for Bump. The tower's weekend gates broke out for the first time in 2 years. Blinded by the sun, it took a step into a world where the smell of herbs seemed incredibly alive. Before her stood Leo, tall, confident, a smile gently shone. The girl froze, allowing memories to intertwine with the present. The sudden gust of joy broke her out of place, but a voice filled with sadness reminded. Time changed them both. Unexpected embarrassment of the breasts. Leo's words about her beauty were echoed with a strange cold. Instead of joy, there was embarrassment that dissolved childish carelessness. Uncertainty has sprouted red flames on the cheeks of Bampi. She looked, hiding a swarm of contradictory sensations that were difficult to call. In the carriage, silence thickened for heavy minutes. Leo seemed to be strangely familiar. His smile did not give rest, and an unspoken anxiety grew. The girl was watching every movement of the night, seeking former sincerity, and found only elusive changes that underwent memories of 2 years of limitation. The movement of the wheels knocked the carriage out of the track, and the Bamps, losing balance, fell on the knight, feeling the moment of comfort, which immediately changed the burning shame. The apology broke up in the throat that their cheeks were burning. But Leo's gaze suddenly became distant, as if the warmth of their childhood had evaporated through the fog. The shadow of the cold went through its outlines. The body seemed to lose contours, transparent, turned into gray moulu. The voice was heard as goodbye, not the joy of the meeting. An unknown dark timbre reported that time is floating. The truth came with a sharp blade. The guy she knew died the day when her gift woke up. The blow of the word cut the soul. The child's mind was convincingly searched for objection, and found only black loss that could not be accepted. The figure that occupied the body of Leo called the Gam. the captain of the Royal Knights, whose ability to temporarily return the dead left only the shadow of a real person. He stretched out the appearance of a ring start, capable of holding back its devastating power, and begged to escape as far as possible to preserve the world from an accidental horror. His words were swollen and unwavering. Remember his voice, because you will no longer be able to return to the past. Save others, saving yourself. The stranger whose steps completed the conversation followed the captain's back. The fate of Bampi made a sharp turn into the abyss of an unknown future. The foreigner confidently directed the blade of Dalahem to the throat, saying that he finally found him. Bampi realized. Her life is a tool of destruction that seeks to absorb herself. Her gift was called Death, the ability, which instantly erased weaker or equal, like a wave of nothingness without any effort and control. The words of the captain split the world. It was this force that destroyed Leo and all around the day of the ceremony, turning the princess into a walking catastrophe. Feeling the blame, the Bamps frozen in the icy wasteland of her own soul and made an order. To live alone, so that no one else is painful. Since then, her path has become an endless seal of death. Where the death of the death, there remained ashes and silent ruins. When the threat reached the boundaries, it dropped the Ring Ripper, and the black wave equalized the cities with the ground, though the heart screamed from despair. Years passed. The Seven Kingdoms fell under the burden of its involuntary force, and every dawn repeated yesterday's nightmare. Exhausted and devastated, she returned to the Randos Palace, looking for at least a crumb of forgiveness, and instead met her father's cold smile. The monarch praised his daughter, Weapons, for the extermination of enemies, and confessed that he was hired to raise her level, seeing it only an investment. But now, when the force became unmanaged, his father declared her threat, pulled out an amulet, and prepared to neutralize his own child. Having broken the Mother Medallion Yard, he activated the Stone of the Soul Destruction. The body of Bampi was lit up as if it were erased from the world. Ancient artifact ruthlessly broke the connection of the spirit and flesh, turning the princess into a silent shadow that was doomed. Only a black spot shade remained in the throne hall, a silent reproach of a parental betrayal, and proof that she once lived. Waking up in the form of a ghost circle of a nameless tombstone, the Bampi had only a mention of Leo, the last thread from the past. Her name was frightened by the most powerful creatures, but the cold and void reigned inside. The level of 100 level was a curse, not giving. He changed everything to the touch of star. Warm fingers mentioned the light, which returned to the heart of the Bumps a long-lost hope. The Rossmayer castle boiled. The kings of the demons felt the chance to break out, and the incendiary Yuri burned from impatience. The prudent Theodore recalled the responsibilities, the protection of the nucleus and Stero. Elrod distributed guards between Galara and Bertrand. Bampi looked at the palm that the young man clenched, and felt a tiny but relentless human warmth was born in it. She intervened with the council, reminding, the true power of the king is not fear, but the ability to create and unite. That is why they swore to him. After her words, an ice silence fell in the hall. 5 owners were extinguished by surprised views, hearing a true feeling from Bampi. The observant Sylvia noticed a spark in the queen's eyes, and carefully asked what happened. But Bampi with a cold smile assured, everything was fine, and a gentle shade of smile and a warmer look made changes. Sylvia asked if the Bamps were truly happy, and she got only a calm, you thought. Since then, Rosmir's atmosphere has changed. It has remained 5 days before the outlet of the demons into the outside world, and the castle seemed to have froze in anticipation. Misaki, staring in the foggy of Aristoria Street, saw the same gray landscape every morning where NPCs and players coexisted in a bizarre fuss. For her, this VR saga became a nightmare. A fascinating game turned into an irreversible death trap for a mistake. She dissolved the windows and breathed fresh air. The sun was caressing the face, and below, in the maze of stone streets, life raged. But every step here could be the last. Death was erased not only by the avatar, but also by the one who was hiding under the helmet in reality. She remembered the disoriented guy, drunk with fear, called the rules of lies and assembled on her, tearing the veil of peace. His hand frozen halfway. The invisible city barrier stopped a blow, leaning the aggressor as an icebreaker. A quiet player appeared from the back and explained coldly, within the city, the system is blocking, so the resistance is in vain. The angry man struck, but the body suddenly devoted, and one step of the opponent broke his will, leaving helplessly. The stranger explained that he cannot kill himself, but he has the right to immobilize the rebel, the strength of their abyss. The assailant's knees were squeezed. He realized, in front of him, probably a bataster, who was known for unobtrusive mechanics. The rescuer turned to Misaki, gently asked if everything was fine. Hearing the timid yes, he asked her name. After lending, he helped to climb and ordered immediately to go to the main square, where the security guarantees safety. The surrounding area is no longer a place for walks. When she came to the crowd, she heard the speech of the Guild of Herbs. The veterans of the Beta held the chaos and kept the city in order. In the evening, paying 50 gold for a cow and a little porridge, Misaki thought how long she would last when the starters of 10,000 melt daily. She remembered how she chose VR because of his love of sports and freedom of movement. The keyboard seemed shackles, and here she had her own muscles. But only the game knew about the game. Now the head was occupied by a dragon, which slowly circled over the city, changing the trajectory, as if watching the sky. Having thought, Misaki did not notice how a friendly Tritiknik approached the table and suggested a supplement with a mechanical tone. The girl took the opportunity and asked a dragon above the city, but the woman again, as if screened, repeated the supply of food. A perpetuous but empty smile was different nerves. Misaki realized. It is a NPC programmed to a few phrases and no living dialogue. Feeling the urgent need for human conversation, she remembered a recent attack and lost the courage to approach strangers. Once she came here in beauty and adventure, and now she only dreamed of returning to reality, where the VR sheet can be removed. Suddenly, a blonde beauty appeared on the platform and declared a master class for newcomers in the scene in the area of herbs. Misaki, with hope, joined the crowd and immediately noticed a dark sword with a long blade. Today's instructor. The man honestly confessed that he was not an eloquent, but he would convey knowledge. His peace and confidence immediately won the attention of the listeners. He explained. Guild is more than a club. It is an alliance for survival where even a crumb of information can save a raid or life. Common trading of resources and strategies exchanges makes small groups stronger than one. This is the power of brotherhood. Today's lesson, he emphasized, a living example of this support. Experience will go to newcomers to make them strengthening. Raising the sword, he activated the fire blade. The flames illuminated the arena. The hot air touched even the farthest rows. The audience froze. The guides advised not to shine unique skills, and the instructor decided to break the taboo for the sake of clarity. He calmly asked if they were afraid to reveal their holds. Blind followed by someone else's advice, he said. Inhibits development. Fireblade has long been known to battlesters, he added, so there is no meaning to hide it. It is more important to learn how to use it. He then called the trembling archer and explained, the remote battle is safer, and the exact shot raises the chance of crit and harm. But the spare skill of athletics allows the archer to take the sword and not to shudder in the melee, which expands the tactical arsenal. The archer was surprised to be flexible in the class, but the coach emphasized that everything defines the most unique scalp. It should be built in the center of the game style. To understand your gift means to open new branches of technicians. For example, the fire sword gives dragon and fire veer. The first technique beats distant flames, the second creates a hellish storm around the carrier. And this is just the top of what can reveal knowledge of his own capabilities. The archers thoughtfully glanced at his palms, convinced that he was doomed to a long fight, and the instructor said coldly, his near confrontation makes the shooter unpredictable even for veterans. The instructor explained, from the 30th level, there is a change of class and the transfer of 3 skills. For example, the exact shot of the sword gives many tactical combinations. The audience revived, hearing about fast shooting, 5 arrows in a moment. The audience is hominy, imagining how this technique will fit into the usual style of battle. He stressed that 5 critical blows in a row justify even the level of level. Magic support meter confuses the enemy, which is prepared to repel ordinary lives. Nisako squeezed the note, feeling the avalanche of information drown her confidence, and sows the fear that she would not survive here. Suddenly, the archer asked why so much attention to duels between people, when the main threat is monsters. The hall dated in waiting for the answer. The instructor lifted his palm. The beasts are predictable, their patterns can be studied, but people are a real danger because they betray and beat where you do not expect. Misaki remembered her own attack and realized that the most wounds here are not the claws of dragons, but the panic and cruelty of the players themselves. Sighing, the coach added, time floated. The rest will be explained in the Guild of Herbs in the east of the city, where beginners are guaranteed training and support. In the heart of Nisako, there was a storm of doubt. Mentors lured security, and she whispered that her knowledge was not enough. One of the players reminded you of the quest board at noon. The opportunity for rapid earnings was stirred up by the crowd. and Misaki followed. In the guild hall, noisy. The task of murder was frightened, but the look fell on a quest of a different color. The search for a fugitive say for a modest reward. Silently, she took a modest assignment. A slight risk, but the first step to the courage. Hunters for precious quests ran further. An experienced veteran cools the passion of a friend. Secret missions often give little things, and solo format increases the danger. The young man retreated. After an hour of searching Nisako, she pulled on the roof and found a joyful dog stuck in a narrow niche. Her heart thawed from a warm bark. She cautiously picked up the animal. The dog twisted with joy, and for the first time in a long time the girl was sincerely smiled at heavens over Aristoria. From the height of the roof, the city was released on a weird maze, and it realized that even in the world of fear there is a place of small victories that return hope. Pressing the dog to her breasts, she remembered her own unique skill and thought, "It is time to explore the gift. Perhaps he would be useful, not a curse." Let the award be scanty. Each completed quest quenches the spirit. In the veins again the determination. With this thought, Nisako, holding the dog, jumped from the roof and promised to herself, "Today she begins the way, where fear will give way to the power of knowledge, friendship, and a willingness to see opportunities in little things." The map flashed with new colors. Its unique life locations slid the horizons and opened dozens of hidden points, promising adventures that seemed unattainable. Happy coincidence. Marking himself as a newcomer in the form of registration, Nisako involuntarily gave the guild the chance to help reveal the ability, and felt genuine care instead of a ruthless game. Although the force is worthless in battle, it is invaluable during intelligence. With a warm smile, the girl released the dog to the owner and felt for the first time that she fits into this world. Returning to the guild, she changed the fear of determination. Take a new quest to search, and let the whole of the halls where the players trade and share plans will become the music of your adaptation. She noticed two girls near the board. One was angry that most were hiding in tavern, not reaching the guild, where there was support and advice for beginners. The girl in glasses turned sharply. Now for them, the main thing is to find people with rare abilities that can change the balance. The satellite wrinkled the forehead. Is it because of the invasion, which is the excerpts of rumors? After all, she was not in beta and knows only the outline of the disaster. The IP sighed and started. In beta tests, the invasion was a fun event, but now that death is real, it is a catastrophe that threatens everyone without exception. During the invasion, the monsters rally into giant hordes and storm cities. Even the relatively calm Aristorias will not escape the wave. Most often, the attack comes at night when the guard is exhausted, and rare monsters are able to erase settlements if not stopped immediately. The hordes grow like an avalanche. Hunger and despair turn animals into a chaotic force that shakes everything in the way. And then the city becomes the last prey, particularly vulnerable to the cities of beginners. Players have not yet been learned, and there is no escape, so the attack means a trap without a chance to get out. Herbalists alternate at night, tracking the movement of the flock. The work depletes even the most durable, and the experience of such operations is lacking. The eyepiece with anxiety confessed. The guild on the border without new strength, the city will not hold on. Not just adventurers are needed, but the owners of special skills. Her gaze stopped at the quest, searching for life. This ability is rare and vital for early detection of hordes. Meanwhile, a small group was playing in the abandoned mine. The raw walls reflected the glare of the torches, and the leader was strictly ordered to remain silent. The girl in a trembling voice reminded that she did not have the permission of the guild. In response, she received an Isekai'D smile. Rules for the weak. Sugar Leader boasted of high-level and infallible sensation, certain that they would experience any danger without outsiders. Despite her attempts to deny, the group moved on. In the dark, something was rushing, watching from each bend, while they walked without a strategy. Unknown in the cloak, watching the shadows, smiled. Human self-confidence is more deadly than any monster, and this expedition is doomed because of its own arrogance. Skillfully spilling over the stone fence, Misaki shattered into a tight lane. The pulse was thrown in the temples, and two armed pursuers were shot behind his back. A short look back, the beard with an axe grumbles that the girl seems to read their thoughts, and the cold-blooded sword explains, this is her talent for detection of life. Jumping for the horn, Misaki sat down on degrees. The trembling hands squeezed the map. The radar was silent. The pursuers disappeared from the visibility zone. Hence, in the raw lane, she remembered the beginning of this chase. Just a quest in the guild, the return of the dog, and suddenly the attention of strangers. At the entrance to the guild, those two noted her bow of the newcomer and prey in her hands. The words about rare quests were conveyed by the desire in their eyes. The bitter memory of the previous attack forced her to immediately abandon the conversation and rush to the side, squeezing an animal like a mascot. Since then, the hunting has continued continuously. The pursuers waited, suddenly appeared. They were clearly interested in them at all, a friendly conversation. She realized that men hunt for rewards, seduced by her series of successful rare quests, and it became only gritter. Meanwhile, in a guild room, a harsh Claire glared at the axe and a sword, making a thundering that they had missed the girl again. Her reproach was fair. The task was to ask for help, and turned into a pursuit. The very appearance of the bulky duo could scare anyone. Claire decided to act herself, to stay and peacefully intercepted Misaki until the men returned to the guild, reducing the tension. However, at heart, she felt excitement. To find a mysterious girl with a rare skill that seized the enemy before his appearance. It was not easy to make a puzzle. A beginner avatar and a basic bow. A common image. And the city is large. There are several quest boards. It should be cooled. Moreover, the quest assignments are the most difficult. The fact that Misaki performs them one by one gave talent, but not location. It was necessary to wait near the estate of Grandmother Megu, where according to the rules it is necessary to surrender the fugitive animals. The chance is small but real. Magu's yard was an oasis of strange animals. Fluffy rabbits and lazy lung lizards were dozing among the flowers. Flame Claire reminded that most of them were brought here by most of the pets found here, so logic suggests waiting here. But Misaki took quests of various types. Missing people, riddles, liquid artifacts, almost impossible to predict the route. The tired Claire settled on the bench and did not feel tidied up, as the courtyard whispered the soothing song of the brutal twitter and rustling of herbs. Waking up from an unusual buzz, she opened her eyes. Something alien disturbed the courtyard of the yard, and her heart prompted. Finally, the needed thread appeared. Nimaki stood in front of the girl, looking around with surprise. Blind dusk, Raw Lane is not the best place to sleep, but a tired stranger with straightened hair just woke up in the open sky. The girl's gaze immediately grabbed a fluffy animal, clamped in the hands of Nisaki, and also Novatsky Luke behind her back and a female avatar. These were the exact signs that once described Flame. For Misaki, the stranger has become a new threat. The imagination has already flashed how she will be taken away by all the difficult accumulated rewards for quests. The suspicion that this girl is associated with those two warriors have grown lightning. Misaki silently turned and rushed. Claire, the name of the girl, remained stunned, but quickly grabbed and tried to catch up, shouting that Misaki would listen to her. The cry drowned in the city Gamor. However, the novice arrow flew lanes with incredible agility. A high characteristic of agility made it steps of the wings of the wing, and Claire was choking quickly. Not wanting to give up, she opened the menu, dropped heavy armor and accessories, made weight easier, and rushed again, hoping to shorten the distance. But even the lightweight Claire did not make up for. Sweat poured her eyes, and Misaki melted the horns like a noon dream. Claire caught herself that she admires perfectly accurate jumps of fugitives. Those movements were not just effective, but beautiful, like a dance. The flames of envy have enlightened her thoughts. This girl seemed to be achieved without effort. A natural talent generated by being a legend. Awareness of his own backlog on self-esteem. All efforts. Claire looked like a weak attempt to catch up with the chosen fate. Flea advice has come in memory. Sometimes a small, unexpected trick breaks the advantage. Claire caused a ripe apple from the inventory. The last chance. "Hey!" she exclaimed, and threw the fruit with all the accuracy that trembling hands were allowed. Nimaki stopped reflexively, caught the apple and froze in surprise. Claire, Jacana fell to the wall. The plan worked. Nimaki still kept the fruit, but in her eyes it glowed confusion and curiosity. There was a convenient system of contacts in the game any interaction left. Claire immediately opened the menu, turned the list and saw a fresh name. Misaki. Meanwhile, Misaki, squeezing the mysterious apple, rushed through the maze of the streets, not understanding what such attention was when a signal of the input message suddenly sounded. The sender was Uni, an unfamiliar name briefly Heart. It was the first private message from the player, and fear fought with curiosity. In the end, she opened a letter. A short, candid text only asked to listen, without any threat, with a touch of despair. The long internal struggle ended with consent to the meeting. Careful, Misaki chose a shadow surveillance. The young and Flame were waiting nearby, behaving calmly, and intuition still whispered the danger. When the young stepped closer, Misaki moved from the shelter, and the alarm escaped with a shout. "Do not come!" Fear and tension again put everything on the border of escape. Flime, standing a little aside, raised her hands quietly. "They are not enemies, only asking a minute and help. No threat." The suspicion of the Misaki was the way, and intuition suggested that these girls are at least not hunters for prey. But someone's apologious male voice behind her back has supported her anxiety. They had more friends than it seemed. The shadow came out of the shadows, and introducing himself to the Gilder of Herbs, suggested supporting the case that could change the fate of the whole server. The shock was pierced by Misaki. It is the same sword that saved it during the attack of the aggressor. The puzzle was formed. The chances were caught up with fear. Since the game became deadly, the scenes have been terrified. At one of the meetings, Kid kept a friend of Carol when he suddenly bowed dead from the blow of a friend. Looking back, the kid of the killer with a cold smile. The level increased. The experience was pouring from the bodies, and death turned into a profitable resource. It's no longer a game, Kid. But the killer was indifferent. In this reality, one who is weaker, only statistics. The killer remembered their duels in beta. Kid always lost, but now losing meant nothingness. He suggested to taste intoxication. He called the new world the times when the winner remains and the defeated melt. There was no joy in words, only the statement of cruel evolution. The cord, squeezed, swung, but the sword passed through the ghost. It was a clone. The killer was behind his back. The chance disappeared. The pay was instant. Hall of Herbs frozen. Nimaki projected a map where the points of living creatures moved, merged, opened the city's breathing. Vatar asked about objects or mechanisms, but the girl replied, "The radar sees only intelligent, monsters, in question." Having expanded the radius, she was convinced that there is no beast in the city. A wonder that forced everyone to frown the forehead. When the circle swept the suburbs, the Vatar's assistant exclaimed, "The coverage is enormous." But Misaki was sharply staring in the sector to the north. A thick flock was glowing on the screen. A tunnel of unclean meters of intestines. Squeezing his jaws, Vatar asked, "How much?" "At least 70, she replied, and in the hall it whispered by the icy wind. The atmosphere has changed. It is no longer a local clash, but the eve of the exposure capable of erasing Aristorias from the map. Meanwhile, chaos prevailed in the tunnel itself. The bodies of the players were lying in the blood, and the group leader shouted to the cold killer standing among the massacre. The dark cloak was not justified, only tiredly asked why, and then lightly inserting a dagger in the chest of another sacrifice. Falling, he did not even hear the murderer with the annoyance. Little experience. Suddenly the partner whispered, "A new game ahead." In the darkness, something great was approaching their trap. From the darkness, the rider emerged, a dark silhouette on a black horse that radiated power. One of the PC whispered, "It is Alba, the other in the Arabs Guild." Another spoke of the award. The murder of such a player would be given a mountain of experience. But his partner thoughtfully stopped him. The legends went about Album. His skipper was not an ordinary horse, but the embodiment of the scream Dark Horse, which took over the power of the owner himself. The partner engulfed the cold. The attack on Album. Suicide. Too powerful, too unpredictable, but it is not time to think. Alba noticed other people's glances and stared at the darkness. There were dozens of eyes flashed behind the diaper. The heart grabbed. It was not a vision, it was horror. Before him, a nightmare scene unfolded, where the boundary between fiction and reality disappeared. He understood. This is not 70 monsters. It is a real invasion. A monstrous invasion that multiplied with every minute. In full armor, squeezing the leap, Alba prepared. Seconds were meaningful. The delay was deadly. He activated the Thorno shield. A translucent barrier sphere, shrouded in with prickly knitting, appeared around. The shield took the first blows. Alba noticed 2 PCs observed from above. He called them. "Run away immediately, otherwise you will become a prey of a horde." They cried back, calling it. They were outlined that they were discovered, and even more, their own helplessness. Alba covered them. The shield stopped a wave of monsters. But instead of gratitude, anger. They didn't like to be saved. One of the PC could no longer stand. He shouted that Alba was not helping those who needed, called and cursed the Guild of Herbs. Returning to the headquarters, Alba immediately reported that there are already 128 goblins in the tunnel. The air in the hall has killed. The worst part is the number of rapidly growing. It was unprecedented. Alba shouted, There was no such thing in the history of the game. Flime was wary. In her voice, anxiety was heard. The Horde stands not just a leader, but Goblin himself, a creature of level 40. Vatar stood like a statue. Even in beta tests, there was no such scale. His thoughts were beaten like a wave of a storm. This invasion broke all the former tactics. Fear has been confidence that even the Arabs would not cope with it. The herbs were strong, but their power could not withstand. What was then left? How could they answer the threat? But it was then that no one knew about the older, a player capable of turning the course of the battle. It flashes hope. Bampi lay on the ground, scratching a cold stone. She looked at the dark figure ahead, begged for death. It was not just a cry. It was a soul prayer that could no longer stand. She begged to put an end to the endless horror of immortality. But the shadow remained silent. Her voice sounded calm, almost indifferent, but every word penetrated her heart. Finally, the man said in the cloak, "No, she still needs this world." This shadow embodied something unattainable. She explained, "Bampi is not just a man, but a border around which the world has stopped. It is a stagnation point, and its immortality holds the whole world in a dead end." The voice from the cloak said that there are many worlds like it, and all of them are part of a large cycle. But her world is no longer developing. Therefore, it should be destroyed, erased to the last particle. However, she is an exception. Her fate is to join special creatures. It will become part of the detachment of the selected. But time has not come. It is isolated, separated from all. Bampi shakes. She pleaded, grabbed for the earth, whispered with despair. But nothing could stop the sentence. The cloak remained cold. He said that she was afraid of nothing. She won't be alone. Already 5, such as she is now, the Bamps will be 6th. Her new life is a divine zone. This is not a prison, but a place of waiting. There they all rest until their time. And so the Bamps disappeared in the dark, locked in a void, where there was nothing but pressure and endless darkness. In the meantime, the old stood in the center of the room, scratching the nape. Before him spread the giant hall with the nucleus in the middle. His heart. Suddenly, the system has notified. A completely new type of monster appeared. It all started with a simple one: to activate the monster ovate. The first task seemed a little thing: to create 2 types of monsters and build 2 basic objects. But the reward, points of dungeons, opened new horizons. The tasks were similar to the textbook, consistent, logical. Build a well, get a lizard, and get new structures. But the path of the old was no longer typical. Under his command, 6 kings of demons. The number of subordinates has increased rapidly, from 100,000 to 1,000,000. Not only did the Demon King be protected, they became the basis for the growth of the entire dungeon. The Podmeal's glasses have flew to 67 billion. An almost endless resource. The old man did not believe how powerful he became. With such resources, he could afford everything. One of the ideas was the monster theater, the arena for shows and fights. His ambitions only grew. He has completed many tasks to improve monsters. Punyo Mucus already had 108 level, almost unreal for its type. But he is still far from the demon, particularly interested in the awakening skill. It allowed the creature to cross the border of being and reach a new level. It seemed magic. An old looked at Punyo and dreamed of who he would be awakened, but he was not ready yet. He lifted the mucus membrane and hugged, as if thanking everything. The awakening will wait. So far, he will focus on strengthening the nucleus. But the defense is not just traps and walls. We need to take care of the lives of dungeons. Inspired by this idea, the old began with the park, the oasis of joy in the middle of the dungeon. Then the school appeared, the place where the monsters will learn, will grow spiritually, and, most importantly, will become happier. Hunger destroys any civilization, so it built a dining room, and for uninterrupted supply a farm. The training grounds and arena supplemented the complex. Now the residents had strength, unity, and purpose. But for the real unification, an inspiration is needed. An old decided to create a new, supreme species of monsters, a symbol of the evolution of the whole dungeon. Calling the first lizard, he added a smithy with weapons to make the monsters pumping in battles. But she suddenly noticed the elf, who waited awkwardly with a heavy sword. It was not. The grace of dark elves has been sleeping in it. He approached, learned the name, and asked if she loved weapons. In response, he heard only confusion. The girl shrugged her shoulders, never thought about it. The sword in his hands seemed alien. An old offered her to become a dungeon master. The idea was touched. She agreed cautiously. He pointed to the forge and declared it a new home and workshop. She did not shine. Can she really stay? Seeing her delight, the old realized, the choice is correct. He felt exhaustion, night without sleep, a bunch of plans. It's time to take a little. Having corrected the temples, he quietly asked, "When you have a mood, throw me a sword." The Elfian was already jumping with joy and rushing to the mountain. An old decided to accelerate the development of the dungeon. The time acceleration function is a strategy tool. He turned on the maximum, times 300,000. The system did not allow more, but this would be enough with his head. He fell asleep with a sense of relief, and the world moved to a frantic gallop of evolution. She was not a hammer. At first it turned out to be Costubado, but perseverance made a miracle. Everyone hit her closer to skill. For the sleeping old age, they coincided instantly. Time was flying. It was not old, gave the craft to the children. And the smithy grew into the most prestigious dungeon workshop. When she died, she lived. The Kovalev clan constantly worked more and more sophisticated weapons, and time and then raced accelerated. What began as a modest smithy became the legendary guild, whose towers stood over other structures, a symbol of years of overwhelmed skill and technological perfection. The heart of the guild remained the descendants of the Unredio. Their present guilder has announced that the blade for the ruler is complete, not just a weapon, but a symbol of devotion to the one who gave them blossom. The whole smithy gathered, waiting for the owner's awakening. I am sure that he would appreciate the work and bless further development. It was then that Yuri arrived in this corner of the dungeon. What was a construction site yesterday turned the giant capital. It seemed to him that he got into the myth. Clouds of spears, perfect streets, palaces, all in one day of accelerated time. Before the eyes was no longer a longing, but a royal hive of life and abundance. Yuri could not understand the scale. He called out of surprise, but felt his back. Bertrand. Theodore stood next to the sword, stretching it for inspection. Sold in the store, the usual thing, Theodore shrugged. Bertrand only got caught. She was a weapon of the masterpiece. Yuri wondered what struck it. She exclaimed, "Elves needed centuries to eroke something like that, and here such blades lie on the shelves." The world turned over. Bertrand noted the harmony of architecture, nature and magicians, the discipline of the troops and the smiling faces of the inhabitants. It was a utopian system. She whispered Theodore, "All this was created by our king." Strong culture and magic merged into a world that seemed perfect. Yuri thought, he knew the power of the old one, but did not expect such a miracle. In memory, the native Arvos came, the land where the gross forces ruled, and the power is measured by the pyramids of weapons near the throne. Their wealth was blowing through wars. Each sword was a blood history. Yuri was always proud of that power, but now his pride seemed primitive. In the world, everything was built, not selected. Technologies, nature, and happiness of people have exceeded his imagination. Yuri realized true greatness is to create and protect, not just to conquer. He quietly acknowledged Bertrand. He would no longer look at the king with contempt. An old surpassed him in everything. In the depths of the smithy of the elves were forging the greatest sword of their history. The gift of the Lord, the pinnacle of their art. Some were worried. The owner has not woke up yet. The senior blacksmith arranged the hook. The blade will be ready and exceed everything they did. The knock stopped when Theodore appeared in the door in dark lats. He pointed to the sword on the pedestal. "Is this a blade for the king?" Overlooking the hall with his eyes, he praised his skill, but added strictly, "This blade lacks the last stroke. Without him, a good sword will not become big." Theodore sighed with regret. The blade for the king could not be something almost perfect. Therefore he, and no one else, pursues a weapon worthy of the ruler. The hands of the elves shuddered from indignation. The exclamations were cracked, mucking over the 300 years of school. They recalled that their guild has been the inheritance of the Parameter's blacksmiths for centuries. In the middle of the smithy, Theodore stood in the opinion. 300 years. How is it possible? Why did Rosmir's inhabitants turn the swords against their own master? Despair and anger burned it from the inside. Without restraining, he grabbed a giant sword. The blade flashed with magical light and, crashing into the stone floor, shook the whole building. The thunder of voice cut the silence. "Remember my name, Theodore of Meltria, the 5th Demon King, Bishop of the Dragonland. The elves were tired, staring at the blade that protruded out of a stone like a lightning imprisoned in a rock. It was not just a blade, a synthesis of strength, art, and primitive magic. It vibrated with energy available to only one owner. The shoulders of the craftsmen were swayed. Their 300-year pride broke up in front of someone else's perfection. One of the elves, feverishly flipping through the ancient folio, suddenly fell. The book described the legendary 6 who defended the possessions of the old 3 centuries ago. They really stood one of those kings. Theodora was also gnawing the question, how did the ruler build such a world? After all, this kingdom, cut off from external influence, reached unattainable height. Every detail testified to a perfect, almost divine plan. It's no accident, the Demon King thought. It is the fruit of the special power of the old. Looking at the puzzled elves, Theodore was going to leave. Already on the doorstep, he turned. Your blade is truly worthy. Your master is a lucky one who has such masters. The modest praise of the mighty ruler struck the masters deeper than any reproach. Theodore noticed a simple knife on the wall and whispered, "Even the little things you have done perfectly." Meanwhile, Yuri from Bertrand hurried to the hall, where he had to be old. Did he really apply the acceleration of time? Yuri nodded. The old, lying on the floor, lazily raised his head and confirmed he planned to accelerate the world only a little to sleep for 10 hours. But he woke up in another epoch. He said he was about to observe progress on his own eyes, but now he does not believe he saw. Yuri looked back to Bertrand. But she just shrugged. She does not know such magic. Her little people who survived in the wars were over before the eyes of the ELN. She cared for them all her life, but in the world, the old different races lived in harmony. If I have to disappear, Bertrand thought, my people will be safe here. She first bowed her knee to someone. We give you eternal loyalty. Yuri, having overcome pride, did the same and apologized for his former disdain. The old was swarmed in the head, but they were bursting with Theodore. When the old first saw Meltria, the edge of the dragons, the heart escaped from the breast. Snowy spears, emerald valleys and rivers seemed to be a living legend. Harmony of strength and nature that impresses before dizziness. Having thought, old recognized. Knowing Theodora warrior, he expected from Meltria of a military camp, where every corner breathed a battle, and saw an orderly country of peaceful work. Theodore just smiled. In an ideal world, he has to fight himself, the rest of the inhabitants, to live without the need to take the sword. They were approached by a gray woman. Theodore carefully asked her back. She sincerely thanked. The treatment helped. Oldly respect. The Draken King takes care of every subject, and therefore does not allow them to wear weapons. Subsequently, Theodore led the guests to his forge, a spacious hall full of metal and coal. Asking for the tightness, he hinted, it was here that the sword for the ruler will be born. The most rare materials glittered near the wall. Theodore turned to the old one. Does that special wishes have that special wishes? An old man openly opened his eyes. The king of the dragons proposes to give him a blade. Joy exploded with a loud exclamation. Remembering, he began to consider the samples. Everyone seemed perfect, and the choice turned into flower until Theodore advised the sword should reflect the owner's soul. They spoke to death itself without noticing time. Finally, the old fell on the bench and watched the work lovingly. Every blow of the hammer in the hands of Theodore radiated grandeur. It is incredible to see a warrior forge a weapon, he whispered. The king replied, it is not a talent, but a forced need. Theodore once had his own blacksmith. The orders became more difficult until he exclaimed, for some time, if you seek perfection, and left. So the Demon King took up the mountain personally. Since then, he studied the balance, alloys, and geometry of the blade, bringing each model to the border. At this point, the door opened. The young maid called for dinner. Theodore accepted an invitation with a grateful smile. Returning to the anvil, he asked the girl to spend the old one in the living room and take care of him, because it was their lord. Surprised and nodded, an old warmth smiled and greeted. At dawn, Theodore solemnly presented the sword called Fang. Light, without jewelry, but perfectly verified, created for daily exercise. An old man was delighted with a blade, asking if he could use it from the first level. Theodore confirmed, noting that the power of the blade would grow with the carrier. The young man happily waved his weapon, confessing that he had his own sword for the first time and protect him as the most expensive treasure. The gifts did not end on this. The king handed a belt with metalwork. Products were created by the ancient guild Kalinka of the Cologne. Everyone is perfectly balanced and capable of sewing armor. An old man asked the promise that this work was associated with. Theodore, with a smile, recalled the long-standing request addressed to Non-Medo. That request, made in a hurry, became the meaning of life for the Elfian. The awareness of this made it old, often dedicated to the fulfillment of his desire, which he had almost forgotten. Taking one of the knives, he put him in his chest and mentally thanked the craftsman for her unbreakable devotion, and promised to honor the gift with dignity. An old thought. You should visit the forge and thank you for their invaluable work. But he is still a first-level warrior, and the masters do not know about it. Therefore, the gifted swords and armor will now be revealed only partially. The characteristics are missing to release their true potential. But this is a matter of time. It will grow up, and then artifacts will become his main support in battles. Theodore, watching the owner, thought, a good blacksmith reflects the wisdom of the ruler. If the old man proves strength and mind, he can trust the future of the world. Meanwhile, the decisive conversation was rising in Rosomere Castle. Elrod asked a direct question. Does the old railway go out? An old confidently replied that the dungeon menu was working without failure. It is enough to click exit. He spoke firmly, though the shadow of doubt slid in his voice. This world was still full of secrets. Bampy, standing behind, whispered to finally happen. An old suggested, let's go to the nearest guild. Let's see how quests work out. Elrod focused on. He was disturbed by another. If they appear in real likes, the consequences will be horrible. Demons people will be perceived as enemies. An old asked why he was so certain. Elrod reminded the unpleasant truth. Their nature remains demonic. People attack blindly. The ruler said that the mechanics of the game really pushes the player to fight the demons right away. If a person adds a demon lord to a friend, the system will still show race and level. It will be almost impossible to mask Elrod. But the main anxiety of the old, how do others react, seeing it accompanied by a 6? It will look like he is the organizer of the death game. In this case, the whole world will rebel against them. 6 Demon King, the vertex of race. For players, this is the final boss, a challenge that must be destroyed. And even if they are defeated, will it become the end of the plot? The answer is not obvious. After all, they are still closed in space, which rather resembles a giant dungeon without exit. The kings do not protect key artifacts, and are not inscribed in the canonical quest chain. It looks like it is forgotten part of the code, the unknown mechanic. Moreover, they are allies and friends now. An old looked at Elrod. He watched closely. The ruler apologized for the hitch and voiced the opinion. Elrod and Bertrand will look the least suspicious. But he did not have time to register how Punyo's mucus suddenly jumped and covered his old with a shiny film. All the 6 kings came up, but Elrod raised his hand. Wait! And he stared vigorously into a strange transformation. Chaos grew. Bampy begged Punyo to stop, but the mucus stubbornly wandered the lord. Then Yuri put forward a bold version. This is the process of changing the appearance. Shapestip. Oldly Punios gently and, as if talking to a long-standing friend, asked, help us, show the way. He smiled and allowed the mucous membrane to act. Sylvia's slightly browned eyebrows. Even after the masking of Elrod will be given demonic little things. Maybe it will only worsen the situation. He listened old, nodding. Logical doubts. But the order is already dead. Punyo rolled, growing and wrapping the owner with a silhouette of a liquid black shell. Elrod, for the first time in his life, did not restrain the exclamation of astonishment. There was a new old one. The face was hidden under a shiny helmet slice, and Theodore flashed in her hands. Bisblind armor blocked anomalies and elements, a true embodiment of royal terrification. In the new armor, the old announced that he was ready to go anywhere. Elrod raised his hand. Some demons should be guarded. But Bampy, impatient, interrupted sharply. I'm indifferent to the plans. I have to see the outside world. Meanwhile, anxiety raged in Aristoria. In the guild hall, the girl with a letter of the friend stated loudly, the event began. PC hunters are real. It is enough to silence. She shakes a letter, where a friend who died in the tunnel of foreigners described the accumulation of PC. Tears and rage were mixed on her scream. Rumors are confirmed, she thundered. I will not sit my arms. Her scream verse when the door opened the flame. She asked to be ashamed. A tunnel hike. A trail without a gate. It's suicide, Flea warned. But the girl pushed help. Fleam pointed to the plaque of the quests. The total raid, Tunnel of Strangers, was announced. A young adventurer appeared in the crowd. No one will make me risk life. Nearby, an experienced warrior, Kamuro, mentioned that the tunnel is the favorite arena of the PC. The veteran was stuck in the last line of the ad. The failure will lead to a catastrophe. It is the duty of every guild. The guy suggested waiting for the enemy under the walls. From behind the column, Alba made, calmly but rigidly. The horde is multiplied every hour. If you do not act now, even veterans will not stand. The chief of them is the King of Goblin. It will destroy the barrier, and the city will lose protection, and the recovery will take weeks. Without a barrier, even safe zone will turn into a trap. A dead silence reigned in the hall, the fear of everyone. No one has moved until the thought of the death of the shelter raged in the heads. The silence was broken by the roar of the door. The hall flew into the hall, breathless, with her eyes full of panic and determination, and brought news that had to decide the fate of the city. The young, barely turning their breath, announced, Vadar B, the leader of the guild, ready to set out a plan of action, all immediately, to the central square. Meanwhile, Old with Bampy and Theodore were preparing to leave the dungeons. The ruler waved the rest of the kings. Elrod only whispered, Be careful. The button on the button is a dazzling radiant of the portal, and the Trinity disappeared. A moment, and they stood again in a familiar world. For Bampy, this seemed miracle. The dream of returning came true and easy. The old looked silently, stopping his gaze on the old tree, under which it all began. Returning to normal life was almost unrealistic. In Aristoria there was a crazy movement. Workshops after day and night stamped potions, barriers, explosives. Suppliers assured that all expenses are later compensated by the guild, and intelligence confirmed. The enemy has more than 300 goblins. On the rise of Alba recalled that this is only the first wave. In silence, the thunderous voice of the Vatar came. He ordered to silence and listen. The Vatar's sword flashed in the sun. He recalled that the battle with the goblins is only the first step of their long journey. He swore that their unity and courage would bring victory, even if you have to give the last breath. The head of the guild rejected all the rules, leaving one thing, to survive everyone. His language was quiet, but confidence remained unwavering. The main thing, to save life, then the battle lasts. Inspired, Alba ordered, To the weapon, forward! The battle exclamation of roar like a thunder. Columns of the soldiers moved. The bells of the lat and the spears that shone in the sun were accompanied by every step. The tunnel of the foreigners is the arena of the decisive clash. Among the enemies are goblin war, more powerful than they had to meet. Alba, like a storm, flew into the enemy. A steel horse scattered goblin, the sword cut with insurance accuracy. He activated provocation. Goblins, forgetting everything, rushed only at him. Vatar supported the cry. The plan works. Magicians are a fiery volley. The burning balls turned the front edge of the horde into a solid flame. One of the mags, the eyes burning the desire for revenge for a friend, put in every spell all the rage. For her goblins, the embodiment of loss, she will not stop until she wipes them to the ground. A detachment was heard above the field. The blades rose, the combat passion united rose. Kid proclaimed the beginning of the counterattack. By activating the fatal skill, he released a fiery tornado. Enemies disappeared in the vortex of flames and steel. But among the chaos, Alba noticed a movement that did not look like the usual two behavior of goblin. It was something else. More dangerous. Alba's voice was sharply broken by an alarming exclamation. The threat is approaching. Vatar reacted instantly. His body shone like the sun, activated magic of the holy night. Having collected all the light energy, he released the holy flame. The dazzling ray pierced the thickets of the horde as if the spear of light. When the radiance went out, in the center stood King of Goblin. The attack only angered him. Massive Sakura absorbed the glare, and the Lord himself moved forward with the icy disdain. Flime called the interface for a moment. The HP scale broke out over the head of the boss. The fight with the main opponent began. Her screaming team returned the warriors to a clear battle scheme. The detachment of destruction was to cut off the ways of retreat and clean the crowd for the king to be left alone with tanks. Only two are able to withstand his blow, Vatar and Alba. The rest should remove small enemies to focus on the boss. The MMORPG raid is not just a fight, but a surgery. Every mission of one link loses everyone. Only a coordinated team could win. The commanders monitored the field, adjusting the actions. Alba, like a magnet, attracted strokes. On a full jump, he plunged into chaos. As much as one smart goblin spear shook his back. The pain shook the body, but it was kept in the saddle. Vatar assessed the situation. It's time to leave. Before retreating, Alba activated the provocation for the last time and rushed directly under the nose of the king, taking him to the Vatar. The words of the call were angry with the monster. The roar of the king struck over the whole field. The earth trembled under the giant steps Alba looped, leading the community of rage just on his friend Tedco. For a moment their views crossed. The defeat is not an option, Alba whispered. Vatar nodded. Coordination decides fate. As soon as the Alba passed the friend, the forces left him. He broke off the saddle. Doctors rushed to the wounded. Meanwhile, the support saturated the Vatar with the buffs. The dome of holy light, iron skin, the blessing of the Pope. The tank became an inviolable stronghold. King of Goblin crashed like a meteor. The protective shield withstood, and the Vatar, roaring, challenged the monster, tying him aggro to himself. The battlefield was slaughtered, and suddenly in chaos the blade flashed. A mysterious person involved in the cloak inserted a sword in the exhausted album. Time seemed to slow down. Kid exploded with the cry of rage. PC killer used to take confusion. The robbers have worn into the meat grinder not to help, but to sow chaos. Vatar, seeing his comrade falling, shouted his name, plugging in the roar. The battle turned into a triple front. The King of Goblin, the Horde, and the insidious PC assassins. And now everyone understood. The price of the mistake is the final death. When the attention was scattered, King Goblin raised a bulky mace. Water, catching a deadly threat, is evading the jerk, and the bloody Alba feels like the forces are melting. Gathering the remnants of energy, Alba causes a black horse, a faithful spirit that materializes in front of him like a clot of strength and devotion. The steep horse pushes the wounded master away, while the mace of the Hoblin King cuts into the ground and leaves a deep clump. The shocked PC Warmore froze for a moment, and then, throwing an evil ironic case about the cunning album, melted in the chaos of battle. The kid, having flashed the rage, rushes out to the revenge. Having realized that the kid, blinded by anger, inadvertently rushed forward, the waterman tries to stop him in vain, and staying without support, turns to healers to save album. The water order sounds sharply and powerful. Immediately heal the tank. Despite his own bleeding cuts, he strokes his hand that holds and retreats, evaluating a critical schedule. Focusing, the fireman proclaims that every second is a road. Near the warrior, exploding with indignation, brains Kida egoist, exposing the overall tension. The water commander's gesture calmed the disputes, reminding that the nagging will only squander the chances and push his death. Exhaling the tension, the fireplace puts two fighters side by side. Views intersect like sparks. Determination flows into a single flow of power. Different characters are erased when both permeates a common opinion. To act as one whole and keep up to the end. The hardy Alba tank, along with two swords, form the perfect fist against King Goblins. And the indignant warrior remembers which the detachment was Kid. To the east, in the dark tunnel of the Ilyana, only the fall of drops and steps of Misaki cut silence. Hiding behind the boulder, she looked at the giant mouse and mentioned cowardly companions. Abandoned in the darkness, the girl was sharpened, but fear became the usual companion. The body did not let the cold when the shadow stirred behind his back. A giant spider in the crystal black shell was woven with the darkness, and the eyes of the carcasses stirred Misaki through. The path is blocked. The biodetector burns red. The creature is aggressive. Gathering freedom, Misaki pulls the bowstring, overcoming tremor in his hands. The arrow flies flawlessly, but the spider is evaded, and in the next moment it hit a paw like a steel hammer. The piercing pain falls on a cold stone. Warm blood soaks the fabric, mixing with stone dust. Not recovering, Misaki feels the sticky threads quickly closed. The spider weaves a cocoon with a frightened skill. Numbness is spreading. The poison has been muscles. The thick layers of the web are wrapped as if the predator was preparing a bait for the next prey. Panic horror squeezes consciousness. The scream breaks the tunnel, but somewhere in the depth, she realizes that salvation may not be. The dazzling ray opened the darkness, leaving the hot loop and forcing the spider to roll. The trembling Misaki suddenly felt that Nadia had re-erupted. In front of her, like a obsidian rock, a black warrior of the old man grew up. The pads were shining, and every ruthless attempt by the clinic faded deadly accuracy in the monster's shell. Stunned, Misaki barely had time to watch the lightning tank of blows. In the darkness, there was a noise of steps and someone's calls for healers. When the roar of the verse, the girl, the bamps, and a stranger came up in the web of the girl. Consciousness floated, but the heart whispered that it was her rescuers. The darkness tightened his eyes again, and she fell into a half-bearing. Waking up, she saw a warm glow of the torch and caring silhouettes that leaned over her. Theodore confidently cut the sticky threads, explaining that the poison was removed and it was necessary to move carefully. For the first time in a long time, Misaki sighed with relief. The vigilant old man noted that the lonely outings in these catacombs were a foolish risk. The girl's gaze confirmed his assumption about the true purpose of the hike. Having weighed the danger, the warrior suggested joining the detachment, because the group has a chance to survive the hire. The embarrassed Misaki carefully made sure that his determination. Starov nodded firmly, presented manner, so as not to attract extra attention, and introduced it to Bampi and Theodore, his faithful families. Looking at the biodetector, Misaki saw the red signals of the monster's facilities and the mysterious purple label, which corresponded to the manor. The device has never shown that color. The girl froze, trying to understand that she lies behind an unfamiliar spectrum of threat. The Monero noticed her an alarmed look. Misaki explained that on the map, where 2 marks were shining, a third suddenly appeared, and this anomaly puzzled both. After a short pause, the warrior decided that hesitation was in vain. It was necessary to move to the mine immediately and release people. The gesture called the satellites to go together. Stunned with care, Misaki bowed low, confessing that she was afraid of loneliness. She called her name quietly, and tears of relief were burning cheeks. Touching the cheeks, she was surprised. Tears were not flowing from pain, but from rest. For the first time in a long time, there were those who could trust. The girl did not realize why she trusts strangers. But the stability of Monero and the tranquility of Bampi with Theodore enveloped her with an invisible shield of safety. Recovering, Misaki showed a narrow but safe passage, the shortest way, which will avoid unnecessary contractions. The Manarot thought, and then asked directly about the location of King Goblin, where the deadly threat looked over their comrades. Concealed, the girl heard the warrior explained, the prisoners would be found, and first they need to support those who keep the front against King Goblin. Misaki reminded with fear that the king is the boss of the 40th level with hundreds of servants, bypassing. The silence broke the Bamps, thoughtfully voicing her own plan. Thinking, Bampi capses that the fear of the Hoblin king is in vain. Their Mr. Layer is stepping after their master, and this power makes the threat almost ridiculous. The words shock Misaki. The eyes expand, she asks feverishly, because the figure 120 seems fabulous, beyond its idea of a possible level. Starov, noticing embarrassment, warns the Bumpy through television not to shine their incredible wealth in order not to give rise to unnecessary suspicion. In the mind, the Bamps are repentance. She recognizes the miss and promises to boast unnaturally high power. Further, Starro defines Theodore's plan, to split to save both groups. Theodore's medicines and shields will protect Misaki, and he agrees without hesitation. The calm tone of Starro is explained to the girl. Bampi moves with him to the front against the Hoblin king, and she and Theodore will move deeper into the mine. Misaki, trembling with doubt, asks if they can meet again, so that they do not stay alone with danger. A warm smile and a solid nodding of Starro dispel her fears. He promises that their paths will inevitably cross. Meanwhile, in the deaf corridor, 2 PCs are bored in darkness. One grunts about the absence of pursuers, the other laughs at his failure. Kid, watching the shadows, breaks between repentance and rigidity, hearing how they smugly remember the skill of identifying the lives that lured the victims into the trap. The second mercenary sways. Even without a detector, the city would not notice the scorching of Goblin, which would cut everyone, and they would have reached the remains and collect the trophies. The accomplice further draws a picture of victory. The walls will fall, the defenders will not remain, and they will open the endless space for robbery. The kid emerges from the darkness. The eyes are burning in rage, and in a cold voice he thanks the mercenaries for the careless revelations who have issued their logo. One PC is close to, reminds that only Water and Alba are able to do real harm to the king, hints at kid's weakness. Swing around, the mercenary incite Kita to return and get a wounded commander, trying to cause an outbreak of uncontrolled anger. Suddenly the second attacker rapidly knocks down Kita, presses a heavy boot against the stone. The rage burns, but the body is stiff with ruthless pressure of the enemy. The assailant scornfully promises something interesting and activates the skill of delaying death, turning the battle into a sinister game on the verge of life. In the world of the game, this ability gives the warrior a moment to hang over the abyss of death, delaying the fatal finale and giving a tiny chance to rescue. And conditional protection. The skill sign holds the victim in the detachment until the end of the battle or full healing, and the second fall in health to 0 removes all barriers. The mercenary coldly explains that such a delay makes the fighter a living dead, condemning him to the powerless agony between being and nothingness. The daring mercenary mockingly explains that the deferral of Cardi holds Kita in the group, and you can stop the torment only by extinguishing him, that he will inevitably kill him. After the pause, he emphasizes that now Kita's life under his authority, forcing him to remember the students and friends who once asked for advice. Memories of Carbo and comrades are breaking the heart. The promise to pass the news to families broken, and the last living detachment member feels unbearable. Kid is aware of his own chain of mistakes, but holds on a crumb of a chance of atonement. While mercenaries decide to move to Abbey, hiding anger, Kid humbly obeys, dreaming of a moment when he comes out of the group near Arab and puts a deadly blow to his executioners. Opening the menu, he is well to go and activate the final skill. And sudden numbness is shaking the body, and the heart is beating more. One mercenary, noticing an attempt, ruthlessly expels Kita from the group, instantly depriving him of his protection and condemning to inevitable death. Kid, ashamed, feels as the forces disappear, and the body is heavily. The cry pierces the darkness, spreading despair and fear on the stone vaults of the tunnel. In his thoughts, he apologizes to his friends when Misaki suddenly appears with a decisive voice, without knowing the trap. Seeing her, Kid warns through the suffering, but she does not have time to understand the dangers as she becomes a mercenary with a blade near her neck. The lightning blow leaves Misaki defenseless. The cold of the steel sticks into the skin, and silence becomes depressing. The second mercenary is indignant that the prey belonged to him, but the accomplice just smiles, rejoicing in the future trove of force. The greedy brilliance in his eyes is evidenced by a dagger, only a means of becoming even more powerful. Kid, flowing with blood, collects the last crumbs of will. The pale glow envelops the body and the heat of self. Sacrifice flashes in the chest. The fingers do not hold the sword. It falls, but the warrior grabs the blade with his teeth. Blood flows, but the look is burning. The enemy makes fun of its advantage, but the Kid does not take his eyes, preparing for the final jerk. The enemy self-confidently predicts another defeat, but in the fragile shine of Kita's eyes is a spark of rebellion. Suddenly the blade flashes a blazing flame, the air roars, and the mercenary recedes, struck by the power he did not expect to see. The flame reflects the dismissal of the spirit. The shocked enemy releases weapons and pushes Misaki sideways, shaking his own arrogance. Kid, almost dissolving in the radiance of the particles, is greeted by Misaki. He has pain, repentance, and unwavering determination to protect. Her eyes watch like the silhouette melt, and thoughts are heard. His last order to escape is the inheritance of the Hildmist, who sacrificed for his friends. Hot tears burn the cheeks of Misaki. The body hammers the powerlessness, and before the eyes dissolve the sparks of the last light that remained from Kita on a cold stone. Inside the girl is a void. The mind is stubbornly awaiting the appearance of the defender, and the ruthless reality tears the heart, reminding that his silhouette disappeared without a gate. One of the mercenaries lifts the blade with a relaxed movement, and, as if every day, states, "Noble samurai died," and the poison on the blade slowly embraced the body of Misaki with hellish pain. Panic grabs the girl, while the second hunter, having fun, chooses the paralytic blade to add entertainment to the next hunt in dark catacombs. The awareness of their cruel game burns in the soul of Misaki the fire of rage, which explodes with a yawn of pain and despair, erupting between the wet walls. Animalized by the call of conscience, the murderer is indifferently yawning and states that the pleas and the question of the motives have long come to his tired consciousness. The shine of the scrapery in his eyes shows that the pleasure of violence has become the only philosophy that is inaccessible in his opinion. The weak girl. The partner is cut into a conversation, explaining that he is guided by purely money, because the bodies of players are the treasury of gold, weapons, and rare relics. He states that the experience gained for the murder of a high-level avatar is invaluable, and therefore hunting people is the most effective way to strength and adrenaline. Every word impregnated with a desire stops Misaki's heart, which recalls the noble image of Kita, the complete opposite of these complacent predators. In a trembling voice, the girl calls their crime madness. Even in the hellish world you can remain people, and her protest is only a mockery. The killer praises the world where he takes everything: life, wealth, freedom, proud of lawlessness, which considers the true beauty of chaos. Misaki is stunned by the truth of Kida's warning. The worst monsters here are people who have lost the last crumbs of humanity. Lowering her head, she holds back a storm of emotions, while the murderer is surprised why the poison has not broken the girlish resistance, and squeezes the blade for a new blow. Another sharp attempt slides without harm. The hunter's face is a surprise that quickly turns into a nervous rage. The partner notices embarrassment and hears a fragmentary explanation. The difference of the levels turns his attacks into vain strokes through the air. Both begin to suspect that they are not an ordinary researcher, but a carrier of hidden force, when suddenly silence breaks powerful, confident voice. The Theodore comes out of the darkness in the glowing lats, becomes a shield between Misaki and the attackers, and proclaims that the girl is under the protection of the King of Dragons. The synchronization of her vitality with a dragon makes even poisonous or magical blades powerless, and these words are heard from mercenaries by an inevitable sentence. One of the murderers, trembling, unsuccessfully tries to recognize the mysterious warrior, finding no name in memory that can explain his formidable aura. Theodore looked at Misaki with a soft, almost apologious look, and explained that he had felt the vigilant presence in these tunnels, and rushed to the rescue, although the prohibition of Starro was holding back true anger and strength. The weight of the promise clamped his shoulders. He could break the abusers into pieces, and had to restrain himself. A close mercenary, catching a dark storm in the eyes of a warrior, scared. Granite tone. Theodore stated that it was not people, but distorted beings who lost their right to life. These words turned the fright of the mercenary into a hopeless raw. Lightning scope, and the first enemy was scattered into ashes, like the bug in the void. Misaki realized that it was only the warm-up of the true power of Theodore. The second killer of the fans, thinking whether it is a systemic failure or unattainable magic. But fear nailed him to the earth, paralyzing his will. Another perfect swing, and the second silhouette melts in the vortex of particles. Theodore does not even change the rhythm of breathing, as if waving the powder from the shoulder. He approaches Misaki, gently takes her hand and helps to get up, sympathizing with the horrors she experienced while in her thoughts the unsuccessful if. Seeing doubts about her look, Theodore quietly praises her stability and reminds that she has been tested with dignity and can be proud of themselves, although these words sound unrealistic. Having an alarming tunnel with his eyes, he gently pushes the girl to the exit, knowing that the chaos Bampi will soon ignite with new force. Meanwhile, in the depths of the catacomb, the battle rages. Hordes of goblins roll up waves, crashing exhausted defensive rows. The cries of exhausted warriors are mixed with the roar of battlefields. One of them is about the fate of the water, and in response is a sinister silence. In the middle of the chaos, Flime squeezes weapons, listening to some of the healers and others fall into bloody dust. Fear, pain, and chaos straighten the air. The honed plan is scattered. The pace of guild slows down, the defense melts, and every second pulls them closer to the defeat. Alba, exhausted, still cuts enemies, and the absence of a fireman is void. The commander's words about the inevitable choice are knocking in memory. Having realized inevitability, he takes responsibility. Each scope of the blade calculates seconds until the fateful decision ripens. Alba's loud order announces retreat by taking command. The warriors froze in distrust, which is immediately cut by the next door of Goblin. Cutting the enemy, he explains that the narrow moves will become a shield, and the phlegm should lead the organized exit to save the living. He knows that she doubts and believes in her spirit, the third in the hierarchy. She was always the heart of the guild, which united them at the most difficult moments. The look of the flame, full of reverence, meets the view of Alba. The determination, reinforced by his faith in her, flashes in his chest. Tears cover her eyes, but she restrains them, because the fate of the guild hangs on the hair, and each fighter is near her insecurity. A deep breath suppressed bitterness in the chest, and already in a firm voice she confirmed the order. She will lead the retreat without a shadow of doubt, filled with unbreakable determination. An old with bamps are observed from the hill. Blades shine, the spell flashes, despair and screams merge into a gloomy combat symphony at the boundary of the defeat. Feeling the inevitable loss of people, the old asks for the further step. And then the Bampi, more serious than ever, recognizes. She is the queen of the undead, whose presence is the presence of death. Her killed skill is an absolute weapon capable of instantly destroying any creature. We weaker for her, indifferent to defense or prayer. Listening to such destructive power, Old feels icy cold along the spine. To understand the scale of this power is harder than to withstand her breath. Bampi confesses. Enough seconds to die nearby. An old manifests the nucleus of the dungeon and realizes that it is no longer possible to avoid catastrophe. The famous owners of demons just seem adamant. In fact, they are captured by the eternal cycle of chaos, secretly dreaming of tranquility that they will never be felt. For the Bamps, the old is not just a rescuer, but the only one who gives her hope at the end of the curse, to liberate from infinite darkness. She is a barely audible whisper she asks to listen to a selfish desire, to give her a chance to get rid of eternal torment of destruction. The trembling palm extends to it, radiating a strange, almost human warmth, which contradicts its deadly nature. In this warmth, a new meaning of its existence is born. Not to exterminate, but to live next to those who see it more than death. Full of repentance, she only asks for the opportunity to redeem guilt, ready to fulfill any order to justify the trust of the old. He orders Kunio to remove knightly armor, opening a real face. Then he asks the bump to protect people and stay his girlfriend. The second condition, he jokingly forbids her to die because he will be sad. Light humor penetrates through tension, leaving it thoughtfully smiling. She agrees quietly, and her gaze descends again to the bloody field. The mess, not to overcome the blind massacre. You need an accurate hand and a clear goal. Realizing that her constant force can evolve, Bampi feels an internal shift, as if shackles crack her inside. She gracefully extends her hand forward, taking changes that should happen right now, not in the distant future. Activates December. The world fades. Thick darkness, alive and pulsating, wraps everything. The wind is raging, the sand is mixed with all, consuming darkness. In this black silence, it echoes a new intention. Not to destroy without parsing, but to hit for sure, protecting those who gave the word. And while a silent storm ripens around her, the Bamps are preparing to direct its damn force against a true enemy, changing their own essence forever. The young tank, shabby and all in the potholes, became a living barrier between the horde and the brothers, insanely ordered to retreat, while the witch was desperate to leave it. Each stroke for the sake of at least one saved sounded louder than the girl's cries, and the fastest words of the young man were echoed with vaults, forcing the hearts to tremble between fear and hope. Suddenly the movements of the goblins broke, as if an invisible rigid flow had squeezed time. The beastie bodies settled one by one into the dust, leaving a spooky silence in the tunnel. Stunned soldiers, caught a moment, rushed to the exit, and the moon of their steps mixed with desperate exclamations about the long-dreamed opportunity to escape. Behind the burned corridor was Dead, catching up with a goblin, stretching his claw paw. Askew, his eyes expanded with horror, and the predator collapsed like a clay statue. In the remote mine, Alba supported the exhausted Vadar, instilling the faith that they would raise the shield and oppose the king of the goblins. The result of the battle depended on hundreds of lives. But the giant figure of the horde's ruler emerged from the darkness, and the first devastating blow of the mace rolled into the ground, leaving Vadarua lonely before the boundless horror. Ink darkness spilled, rubbing borders and sounds, as if absorbing the light from the air, and cold fear struck every corner of a stone maze. The twisted wind of the flurry lifted the dust, weaved it with the darkness, and in a moment the darkness retreated, as if it were crowned with an invisible force that intervened in the fate of people. The dazzling glow was overflowing with a wave of warmth. The dungeon shone and poured into the hearts of soldiers uninvited hope, turning fear into a great breath. In the center of the dawn circle stood a heavy breathing water, feeling the grandeur of an unknown force, which pulled them out of the arms of death in the last second. Later, the chronicles of the guild will describe an unknown phenomenon in the tunnels of Ileana, which dissolved the enemies and gave the doomed chance to return alive. The warriors, certain deaths, stepped into the city, confused with salvation, because the goblins disappeared, as if someone had erased them with reality with one wave. Only one name was inscribed in the chronicle with honor and sadness, and the reason for the disappearance of the enemy remained a mystery that gave rise to many assumptions among the consecrated ones. Meanwhile, in the world of the dead Bamps, she watched the old viewing menu of possible actions, standing among the depressing silence of a gloomy pantheon. Suddenly he activated the challenge, and even the Bamps were surprised why the Lord, who had already had the legions, knew creatures in the middle of the chaos of the living and the dead. In the air materialized a slender vampire in purple rods and bone, only in a black cloak. Both breathed in ancient magic and danger. The humble worship instantly changed the fierce look. The nature of the dead took the mountain, and the creatures rushed to each other, tearing the darkness of the flashes of passionate hatred. The calls of the old were melted in the roar of the blows, until the royal voice of Bampi, the formidable and the powerful, did not cut the abyss, forcing two monsters to stone. She was walking with the royal grace and announced that in the face of the Lord, their enmity was a shame, returning to the dark servants of the iron discipline of humility. The harsh exclamation made, only a vampire was frozen, realizing the guilt, and the Bampi realized that thirsty destruction of creatures should be taught to live in harmony with the new world. She was thought, she felt the city growing, while the old larynx was the menu, where the proposal to synthesize 6 evolutionary cocoons for further strengthening forces. He declared in a voice, from now on, these two would become the right hand and left. Handed Bampi, and his words thickened, like a royal decree. Only, harsh in bone grandeur, bowed the skull, and the gracious queen of vampires shrunted his fingers, reflecting the endless new opportunities. Days pass. Bampi, sitting on the bed, silently wanders with his thoughts, while the vampire eagerly reminds that the seclusion is damaging the body and soul. She approaches the stained glass and shows the library's germ, adding that to miss such a miracle would be an irreparable mistake. Ironic smile. Most books do not read with rotten brains, so the idea seems waste. But then he reveals a secret. He only teaches the resourceful runny nose of the basics of language, and some have already mastered simple yes and no. Bampi is amazed. Even the world frozen began to evolve, and because of the efforts of the old shift, they became inevitable. The realization that you can create a smart runny nose of the 100th level stuns it. There is a real transformation of reality. Stuffed by the power of old inspiring, she thinks how little he says that she immediately notices the talk queen. But explains, the ruler himself considers this world a reflection of the loneliness of Bampi, so he created new lives to dispel silence. Their language and will are intended to fill its days with content, and warmth are a real promise against emptiness. Every tower and every disturbance in the kingdom is a gift only for her. The words of the queen are severely falling on the heart of the Bamp, surprised eyes flashing with confusion. The world, creatures, and even the words themselves exist for it. The queen shines with a smile and insists. Time to go out because their conversations are quickly exhausted, ahead of the place of the new beginning. She suggests to choose a name, as another queen may appear, and there will be confusion without a name. At this point, Only enters. The vampire jokingly welcomes him and says that he also suits a real name. The skeleton bows his head in surprise. Smiling for the first time in a long time, Bampi calls a vampire of Ilmia, and only Akata, putting in the names of love and devotion. Ilmia shines with joy, while Kata stands unwavering. In his essence, the unbreakable loyalty to the new lord sweeps. Kata is amazed at the depth of new names, and Bampi, barely smiling, explains that she simply recorded the feelings that her assistants gave. She adds that she no longer wants the title of the queen and does not want to be quoted by the king, because each of them controls a separate, excellent world. Ilmia, with ironic warmth, notes that the marriage would unite their kingdoms, making it old not only with a satellite, but also the legal owner of the subjects. The burned Bamps blushes and sharply interrupts a talkative vampire, considering such bold assumptions too premature and unrealistic. Meanwhile, the clerk has habitually reviewed the parchment in the guilds, listing the typical quests while the visitor announces an unusual application. He turns out to be an old man who asks him to register with the families, which is surprising because such requests are extremely rare. In the guild meeting room, the isolation is discussed. The largest forum has fully moved into game mail, and now coordination is conducted exclusively within the game. Water is welcome on the achievement of the 4th level, the highest in the guild, which at the same time gives authority and puts an additional burden of responsibility. He was charged 48,000 gold and rare equipment, and the commander, Awkward, emphasizes that the reward does not reflect the true merit of the whole group. When they violate the mystery of the sudden disappearance of goblins, the fireman confesses that he is faint at a critical moment and cannot shed light on the event. He thinks whether the round of defense could simply end, because the mission description did not have conditions for the time or number of enemies destroyed. Flyme specifies, the experience of everyone got at the same time as if someone is unknown to strike, and this feeling of someone else's power is still worried about it. Alba adds that the scene resembled a spell of instant death, which simultaneously moved the whole horde, although such magic contradicts the logic of the game. The warfare assumes a systemic failure or external intervention, as even the most powerful magic has the limits of range and the number of goals. The mystery remains unresolved. They decide to gather more facts and report to the Adventure Guild, although they can only guess. Despite misunderstanding, their feat was noted. The city gave a luxurious mansion under the headquarters and 3 legendary defensive relics. The young shows the giant magical towers to the giant magical towers, which in the case of active protection, make the city invisible to monsters and looters. She explains that the full barrier hides not only the inhabitants, but also the walls themselves, forcing enemies to wander around without finding hole. Water is aware of the importance of a new fortification, and Alba notes that they now open completely different, ambitious horizons. Having collected his comrades, the water firm states that it is time to form a shock group and move to new tasks as the fortune is on their side. A young stranger looks at the Battle of Ilyana's tunnel near the city's board. Memory returns her to Theodor. The verse repent, because it is carelessness that pushed the knight with danger, and he, unmoved, regretted only about her fear. That insightful look, as if he read every step of the path, convinced the girl that Theodore knew all the details, from the first steps to the same moment atonement. The look stops on the sword of Kita's sword immersed in the ground. The arms are still strong, and the absence of the owner weighs more than steel and reminds how close was death. Theodore views the menu of resources and materializes a glowing armor and a bow to her from the wreckage of the Lord Sterid's wreckage, a deposit for future training. In a cold tone, it reminds of the need for practice. Misaki embarrassed weapons, but Theodore assures that time allows you to prepare for the return of the ruler. The sudden roar from the tunnel drowns their silence. In the dark, there are mutilated but living people, and Theodore's vigilant look is convinced that it is true surviving. Aware of the completion of his own mission, he proposes to disperse. Misaki's heart fades, but she understands. It is only the beginning of her path in testing independence. His silent lesson is reminiscent of courage and recklessness are patience and work. Daily steps make strength if you do not forget the basics. Embarrassed by her own ignorance, she deeply bows to gratitude and returns to the surviving group to help them get out of the darkness. In the square, with the soft glow of the event, Water announces the tomorrow's funeral Kita, the unbreakable mentor and the shock sword of the guild, whose life became the price of victory. His death leaves a painful void, and the commander emphasizes that today's victory is impossible without the self-sacrifice of the mentor, who stood until the last breath. Near the fresh tombstone, under the protection of the magic barrier, Flame and Misaki, among others, silently swear to become stronger and return to the real world. Misaki asks to take her in the guild. From now on, she wants to fight side by side with the heroes and not remain a burden on their shoulders. Despite the harshness, the flame corresponds to a warm smile. In the heart of Misaki, fear and inspiration are mixed. Thoughts flock to a mysterious shot, which continues to lead it forward. In a remote rector, the old stands among the fogs and rocks, watching as a giant demon, conquered by force, receding, reminiscent of the subtlety of the border between the ally and the threat. The formidable creature eventually slows down, and the ruler sighs relief, and the force of the subjects is reminiscent of how fragile control of pure rage. Next to him, a girl with a sly look. Following the monster, she warns not to step on a demon on the tail, but over her head shimmering an alarming icon chip. Having checked the status, Old sees her rare debuff unfortunate. The Guide of the Lord suggests to spend points of dungeons on the treatment of anomaly. After the ritual, the skull disappears. The relief is fleeting. The girl suddenly breaks and escapes, and Old realizes that real wounds are more emotional than systemic, so the rat urges to be careful. Bertrand approached the Old and announced that the Demon Lord Council was waiting only for his orders. Growing to the sunset, he moved to the castle. In the throne hall where the torches met the bizarre shadows, the Lord declared the theme, Mother's Shoy, the basis of the world. 6 lords listened, frozen. Sylvia's tranquility cracked. She turned to Theodore, and the sage confessed that he knew only one thing. It is the name of the deity who manages reality. Bampi acknowledged that the victory over the King of Goblin only delayed inevitably. Strict Yuri thought, weighing the risks. Street Elrod stood up and denied that it was not about any of them. Bertrand, standing away, nodded gloomily. After pointing to the castle, the dragon emphasized that the trip between the worlds is possible only through the will of the Subunslured Old. All the views came back on it. Elrod mentioned creatures outside their reality, before which even demons seemed tiny. The excited Eerie barely restrained the exclamation of a guess. After a tense pause, a name was cut down. Vladimir, the god of darkness. Eerie broke out a great adventure. Pharaoh flicked, calculating the dangers. Elrod recalled the legend. Everyone who challenged Vladimir disappeared without a trace. Only the transfers of boundless darkness were returned. The dragon asked the old to take him into the outside world. He said he knew where to look for a dark deity, and it will be confirmed from heaven. The question of Elrod's flight smiled. Wings. His natural gift. An old agreed and opened the menu of transition between the worlds. Scrolling in the settings, he was aware of the unknown, perhaps an event that would turn over all existence. He said goodbye before leaving. Bampi crossed her hands and wished caution, but he replied that it was only intelligence. Eerie noted that the god of darkness is unlikely to be happy to the guests, and the silence in the hall was thickened. Sylvia nodded, and the unmoved Theodore added, "He indifferent, who would be on the way. Do not stop them." Bertrand smiled and said that she did not imagine the defeat of Elrod, as if it were an axiom. The space around the old and Elrod flared white and then absorbed them with a solid darkness. The Lord shuddered. He recognized the interstitial transition, a place where he once visited only a moment. Time stretched like a trembling water splash. The boundaries of reality fluctuated, promising unknown trials ahead. The space of the interspecular corridor was not felt by a typical portal. And Old mentioned the discussion on the forums. The key locations of Aristorias, the Ilia Tunnel and Kelocastel, were like the links of one chain. The Rosmagiora Castle, located far from the player's starting point, looked on the map by a random spot, as if someone without logic had built a dungeon with a hidden meaning. The realization that his ability of the manager of the dungeon is not just adapting, but subjugating the game, gave rise to a gap between the game reality and a sense of their own role. An Old thought he would become the fate of Aristorias without his intervention, and the reflection broke up the voice of Elrod, who noticed that the satellite was frozen in the hesitation. Despite the brief objection, at the heart of the old man felt. The anomaly of his abilities turned into the obligation to use this tool to survive all. Once they touched the land, the wind roar broke up by the orders of an angry voice. The invisible commander managed to get rid of uninvited guests. The deaf river of the winged monster answered the darkness. The creature showed disobedience, demonstrating its pride and unwillingness to obey another's will. A moment, and a giant black bird with wings that cut the night flew into the darkness. The cold glitter of the eyes gave an ancient, original threat. Elrod, like an experienced hunter, did not move, only warned the old head. And after that, in the space, a sinister shouted rolled in space. Hundreds of shadows stretched behind the conductor of the pack, and the heart was stuck, because the black wings closed the sky, as if the unpaired curtain. The bird, clouding the moon, treated with thunderous grunts and threats, swore to erase them from the face of the earth. Elrod met it by icy peace. 3 guards, avatars of a dark hurricane, flew out of the darkness. The central bird accelerated, and the old, feeling the deadly danger, exclaimed the attack. Elrod only answered with a confident look, and launched the skill of the Keeper of the Time. The surrounding reality slowed down like a viscous honey. He then applied large magic, reducing man's cost 10 times, demonstrating levels outside the ordinary archimags. The movements of the birds broke. The invisible chains of time pulled them to the ground as the rune of the rewritten laws emerged in the air. Swinging the absorbing abyss, Elrod immersed the space into a solid darkness that greeted the light and the matter itself. In the eternity of the dark breath, a blinding flash crashed, a pure ray of the darkness, and erased everything that could pose a threat. The leading bird froze with horror in the icy eyes, watching the entire flock is scattered by nothingness under the pressure of magic of the 12th rank. In the glow of residual energy, Elrod looked like a legendary ruler of the elements. An old enthusiastically acknowledged him in the true High King Char. Dragon recessed. The dragon felt that this fight was just a response to something more grand. With his hand raised, he seemed to have grown up the ripple of the invisible forces of space. He listens to an old manor, thinking whether it is the end of the journey. Elrod asks about the next step, and he, radiating adamant confidence, takes all his responsibility. Elrod stops the time, graceful gestures draws the runes of initiation, and the space, pierced with high magic, shimmers with an ancient glow. Through the trembling light, he calmly says that his power is able to carry them even to the edge of the world. And quiet words break the deaf silence. The vortex of energy is formed into the black sphere, which absorbs light and space and radiates almost crazy boundless power. On the throne among the run, Elrod confesses the Bamps that are not offended, but reflects on his own inability to break the barrier and find a dark god. He explains that even the magic of the 12th rank and the complete release of force was not left to protect any crack. Bertrand, crossing his hands, is amazed as the highest charming peak proved to be powerless before a mysterious obstacle. Elrod specifies, "The upper layer of the shell is destroyed, but under it lies the field from ancient dark runes known only to the chosen." The stunned Bertrand whisper the names of 4 great spirits of darkness, and suggest that the barrier is nourished by their prayers. The dragon confirms, "The creation of the servants of the god of darkness should not be broken either with a blade or a spell. Even Rosmera's walls are forged from the same indestructible matter." Theodore adds, "The only way is to suppress the prayer, that is, to curb the spirits." Sylvia asks whether all 4 need to be destroyed, and the strategist nods carefully. Elrod emphasizes, "The protective field blocks the entrance to another mine. By removing him, they will find the path to the god of darkness." Bampi, with the eyes that burning determination, raises the axe and requires the coordinates of the spirits, is ready to go immediately. Elrod tells about a book hidden in the Labyrinth Teru, one of the 3 most complex dungeons, which contains information about spirits and keys to stamps. And Old recalls that the entrance to Teru blocks another seal. Elrod confirms and notes that the keys exist, but the place of their storage is unknown. Sylvia, with despair, says that it is a closed circle of obstacles, and the Old replies, "There are no hopeless situations in the game." He explains, "Every difficulty is a task that requires effort and creativity. We will have to take all the steps. Let them seem superfluous." Bampi mentions events in the tunnel and notes that the previous quests could have other consequences. Old recognizes their complexity, but calls the experience invaluable. After the pause, he solemnly states, his decision to play himself, conscious and inevitable. The words of the Old sound confident, and they are anxious. Bampi is indignant with whether he really risks life, and restrained Bertrand warns of a deadly danger. The compressed fists and the piercing look of Bampi reminds the Older of her strength. She insists to take the whole thing on herself, referring to the success of the tunnel operation. The last reaching territory for the players is the Iron Fortress of Sandra, an outpost on the edge of the unknown, where groups form bases and exchange data for survival. Old emphasizes not only the strength of demons, but also synergy with players whose unique vision can become the key to the finals, despite the loss of traces of spirits in the chaos of events. To penetrate the alien, he is ready to abandon the constant presence near his comrades and choose a different role that contains a pragmatic victim. The explosion of the emotions of Bampi grows into a plea to remain nearby. A warm look Old accepts her support, recognizing that even his strength is not alone. Careful reflections lead it to the conclusion. You need to become a link between residents and players, not depending on each individual. Plan. Change the class to the referencer to combine the status of a player and Lord Monsk by entering into contracts with all the leaders. Interested Elrod raises his eyebrows. Old explains that Misaki considered the families to be enemies, but her knowledge of the labels can be incomplete. He suggests that the false interpretation of tags has forced the girl to perceive demons as a threat, so the contract is able to change their status. The goal is to turn demons into allied families to avoid conflict with players and remove the enemy label. In the status of families, demons will be regarded neutrally or friendly, which will open the way to a combined offensive. The theory remains untested, and Old honestly warns of a possible failure, promising to return to the old strategy in case of failure. The first agrees the restrained Elrod. Behind him, the nod supports Sylvia. Their determination strengthens the unity of the community. Without the Height of Bampi declares his willingness to follow the Old One, and he announces the next step. Changing the profession requires a visit to the guild. Unexpected obstacle. To move to the class of the recruiter requires the 30th level, which is not yet reached. He asks for comrades to help with experience. Yuri immediately offers help. But Theodore, armed with knowledge of creating the best weapons, states that his skills will become decisive. The dispute between the 2 proud heroes flashes until the calm female voice from the shadows stops them, returning attention to the case. Bertrand goes forward and insists that her unique set of skills makes her the perfect candidate for experience for the Old. The light wrinkle of Yuri is rapidly inferior to Unity. He agrees, though with hidden annoyance, and Bertrand thank you very much for their compliance. She proposes to start a trip from her native land of elves, where the resources and battles obtained can quickly bring the Old to the desired level. Elrod, stroking his chin, stared into the void, reflecting on the mysterious intentions of Vladimir, which only hints at Goblinsky raids and dark hurricanes. Sylvia suggested that the god of darkness destroys those who refuse to fight or act self-manner, and the meaning of such a rigid selection was still unclear. Immersed in silence, Elrod acknowledged, "It is almost impossible to grasp the thoughts of a distant deity, so people will have to reveal the secrets of this world alone." He wondered whether Vladimir Mortal's unbearable trials were to grow so that they grow up, nourishing his divine superiority. Theodore noted that despite the incomprehensible motives they lack the facts, and best of all, to trust the plan of the old. Elrod agreed, though anxiety trembled in his gaze. Meanwhile, Starro and Bertrand were traveling by the Elfine forest, where every stone seemed like a work of the artist. She asked to temporarily keep Puño's armor in the settlement. The streets seemed empty. The air saturated the resins, and the strange silence was alert. Old felt the invisible cold of anxiety squeezing the heart. At the deserted training ground, Bertrand allowed to remove the mucous membrane of the armor. Nothing will prevent the mastery without unnecessary witnesses. After handing a wooden sword, she lightly performed a triple stroke. The usual technique came to life in her hands, turning into a sophisticated steel dance. Old tried to repeat the movement, but the tension issued a newcomer. The silence of the mentor suggested that not a copy, but harmony of body and blade. Bertrand explained that system assistance makes strikes perfect, but predictable, and a reasonable opponent will quickly use the pattern. She opened the menu and showed how to turn off the automatic assistant, to learn to change the trajectory or cancel a third attempt by her own feeling. Its new cuts radiated freedom. Every unexpected angle argued that unpredictability prevails static power and sets the rhythm of a living battle. The thirst was mourned. The old realized that the real power was born outside the system framework, when movements become a continuation of the soul. He turned off and plunged into training, seeking to turn mechanical repetitions into a flexible style capable of changing instantly. Bertrand nodded approved. The path from the template to improvisation will make it a worthy role of the relic as the relicking, and will unite the worlds of people and demons. Somewhere in the horizon, dark clouds were thickened. A reminder that the time chosen by training will soon become a decisive battle. But this evening, a new sword was born in the green heart of the elven lands. Every incision of a wooden blade was erased between a player, lord and man. Bertrand smiled, realizing that her student was making the first step towards the union, where demons, elves, and players will stand side by side against darkness. Under the starry sky, the old man felt the lightness outside the system for the first time, and realized that changing the class would only be a small part of the big path. Her demonstration fencing proved, when the movements are flexibly adjusted to the situation, the battle turns into art, and the old, catching every gesture of the mentor, finally realized the meaning of the lesson. Bertrand emphasized that accuracy and rhythm are born of discipline. Noticing the tension of the student, she was convinced that he was holding on and ready to go on. After the apology for the complex explanations of the old thanked the mentor, although inside the excitement is a clear anxiety, generated by new discoveries. He could not ignore how Bertrand was managing the interface, which was more than an experienced player than a typical resident of the world. The memory has contrasted. The NPC Urban followed rigid scripts, never going beyond template phrases and actions. From the first meeting with Bampi, the old noticed the exceptional depth of the demons, but now suspected that something more was hidden under the surface. Looking at Bertrand, he for the first time suggested that his behavior could be the consciousness of a real person, not the script code. Embarrassed by his own assumption, quickly looked away, turned off systematic help and plunged into training, trying to get rid of doubts. The mentor raised her hands to the ancient tree, calling for his strength. The giant trunk answered with gold streams, who enveloped 2 training workers. Energy of the skill of accelerated life joined the muscles of the old, awakening sleeping reserves and opening the way to long-standing adaptation. Thanks to the gift of the Elfski, the growth rate of characteristics has increased multiple, and the cost of experience at the level has decreased significantly. Bertrand explained that without systemic crutches, improvement seems difficult, but perseverance and their own plasticity destroy any limit. Inspired by this faith, the old vowed to lay out full and make movements with a continuation of will, not mechanical repetition. Several days of grueling exercises turned the body and reactions, but the experience for the level did not grow. The mentor reminded that real growth gave only battle. She firmly stated that time to go out to the front, because only blood and risk will open the path to the level of 30 required for the class of the reprimand. Old tried to ask a little more preparation, but the mentor did not promise anything, feeling his uncertainty. Suddenly the King of Goblin was in front of them. Bertrand took a blow on, instructed the student to destroy a small car, although the fear was breastfeeding. She reminded that under the cover of accelerated life, his wounds would heal instantly, and the strength would return faster than time to come. When the exhaustion was completely clamped, the old barely pronounced apologies, admitting that he was no longer able to raise the sword. Without hesitation, Bertrand picked him up on her shoulders and pleaded guilty. They went too far from the sacred tree, where her gift loses power, so the way back promises new trials. Bertrand accelerated the move, realizing that the enemy could appear at any moment. She gently assured the old that it was enough today, but he just sighed hostily. His forces left him. When she stopped, the boy had already slept on her back. Smiling, she whispered the wishes of sweet dreams. But the peace lasted for a long time. The air changed suddenly. Tense, Bertrand caught the rustle. Eyes flashed in the dark. Not wanting to bother the old man, she hesitated, but, feeling the threat, gently woke him up. The first thing to see the old were dozens of light eyes in a complete darkness. The panic engulfed him, and he shouted, retreating. Bertrand firmly said that it was not the monsters, but the spirits, and she would cope. Speaking forward, she directed the spear directly into the dark, like a shadow among the stars. Her voice sounded confidently. Light always wins the darkness. The closer the darkness is to its source, the stronger its care. Without hesitation, she attacked, the spear flashing, cutting off the darkness, striking the first spirit. The light broke the shadow. One of the monsters lost the limb, the rest dissolved in the forest, as if they were never. Bertrand stood still, waiting for everything to subside. Slowly lowering the spear, she explained the old that it was an evil spirit generated by despair. His return is not fast. But the anxiety did not leave the old. The gaze slid into the forest where, as he seemed, the girl's figure flashed. The ghostly and surprisingly familiar. But when he looked, there was no one there. Bertrand with a gesture invited the path. An old gathered with forces. Meanwhile, as he trained, Misaki was in the center of the arena Samusam with inner demons. Voices like a snake whispered to her for defeat, fear, and hopelessness. But Misaki has not heard it for the first time. She closed her eyes looking for inner hardness. Take a deep breath. She pulled the bowstrings. Hands trembled, but remained calm. She knew she had to fight. Internal voices fell silent. Concentration and determination appeared instead. She understood. Victory depends on the ability to overcome fear. The guild tournament was coming to the finale. The last match promised to become a spectacle. The audience froze in anticipation. Misaki, a mysterious archer, which was rumored, and a shant, a robber, known by cunning and skill, came to the arena. The shant hid behind a wooden fence, squeezing a dagger. She realized that in an open battle she would not withstand. Her chance was only silence and a blow to the shadow. She planned to sneak and hit the first. The advantage of the melee was its only trump card. But suddenly the arrow crashed over her head. The shant was frightened, the heart squeezed, and she rushed to escape between the obstacles. Her body slid, barely touching the ground. One by one, the arrow whistled past, accurate and dangerous. But happiness was not yet betrayed. Shant got to a new shelter and breathed hard. The heart was knocking, legs trembled. The plan began to crumble and doubts in their head, but they were cut off the feeling of cold metal near the cheek. The gaze got up. Misaki stood in front of her. Her eyes were calm, without anger. The shant's strategy collapsed. The bow was only a bait, and the true threat was hidden in the melee. Shant lowered his hands and fell to the ground. The bitterness of the defeat pressed from the inside. Her pride of the robber was destroyed. How could Misaki so be played? She did not restrain her and asked, "Why did Misaki use a bow?" Despair and misunderstanding swelled in the voice. Misaki, thinking a little, sincerely apologized. She gave a shant her hand, explaining, "Her silver bow is too strong. She wanted an honest battle, without the advantage where everyone will show their own. Not survival, but a worthy competition." Misaki's victory quickly flew through guild. Her position remained stable, the 29th in the total rating, the 5th among the shooters. A month after the battle in an alien tunnel, but his echo still accompanied it. Misaki trained, executed the guild instructions, and watched closely on the grounds of invasion. The habitual day began with a visit to the guild. Lumia, as always friendly, noted her new rating in the rating. Misaki nodded, slightly aware. Lumia, used to her restraint, asked the usual, "Will one work today or in the group?" In the far corner of the guild, the fuss prevailed. The new moon with loose hair is confused with the head, not knowing what to say. His friend was annoyed with his hands, called him Makoto, and reminded that time to go shopping is important. Makoto sighed, they say, does not want to buy a new shield. The old man still serves well. But the friend said seriously, the shield is the second heart of the tank, and carelessness is unacceptable here. Makoto argued a little but confessed, a new shield will eat all the money he had put on entertainment. This word caused an explosion of indignation of the girl behind. Tsukichi could not stand her sarcasm and asked that she was referring to a obscene place. The question was called as a call. The girl flashed, sharply answered that she was not going to explain anything. At this point, the door opened. Misaki appeared on the doorstep. Her voice sounded like a commander, clearly, calmly, powerfully. Are you all of the 21st detachment? She asked, forcing the hall to silence. Makoto froze, then barely believing his eyes called her name. Even the restrained Tsukichi became lost. His face faded, and his lips trembled. Misaki is the heroine of the Great Invasion, the goddess of the silver bow. Her name was pronounced with reverence. She, awkward, lowered her eyes, did not get used to such glory. Makoto, recovering, immediately grabbed the opportunity. He began to explain that they were looking for people in a detachment, but even in dreams they did not imagine that such a legend would come to them. The atmosphere was slightly relieved. Makoto with a smile suggested that Misaki may agree to their request, but Tsukichi stressed sharply, without a new shield nowhere. The girl from the team asked Misaki to talk to the leader on the equipment. Misaki thought for a moment and clarified, what shield is in Makoto now? Inokanta, having squeezed his gaze, hesitantly admitted that his current shield only 18th level, Rage of Storms. The words sounded as if they were torn through their teeth. The girl from the band flashed. She saw Magoto swayed her 36th level, and such a children's shield shames the top 10 tanks. The pride of pride made it that he was straightened and loudly promised to buy a new shield at his own expense, and to direct the money to the equipment of comrades. Pressing the old shield to his chest, he whispered warmly that this bulky sheet saved his life, while reflection of the goblin invasion. Misaki realized that Magoto's attachment is not a stubbornness, but a scar of last battle, where he became a living wall between the horde and friends. For the tank, the shield is more than the tool. Its strength depends not only on their own life, but also the safety of everyone behind the back. On the way to the gate, the detachment decided to introduce themselves and better know each other under the roar of the wheel of the cart and the lat. The first was Tsukichi, a smiling Sibyloff, who dreams of becoming a master of two blades. His level almost touched the 18th mark. Further, Katal, an incendiary contender in the Fiery Magicians, so far on the 15th level, asked for support, flashing energy like a sparkle of heat. The third was Kiko, a level 16th, which was joyful of Misaki about meadows and daggers, and Barbara Stan of the 17th level assured everyone of reliable support. Finally, Magoto, jokingly, offered to call him Mako-chan, which caused the curve of Tsukichi's smile. Nobody called you so yet. Modern but frankly, Misaki introduced, level 29 archer, ready to work side by side with such a colorful team. The task is to destroy the goblins near the gate. Magoto confidently gave orders. Tsukichi covers. Kettle increases attacks by flames. Every mistake was expensive. Magoto kept the excessive passion and sounded the barber in time, which enveloped him with a healing glow. After the battle, the leader announced a break. The incendiary Tsukichi grunted, but the wound on his hand, noticed Misaki, showed the wisdom of the decision. At the fire, the team enjoyed the heat. The sparks were reflected in the Magoto shield, as if reminded of his silent care. Misaki noticed how carefully he was watching everyone, not only the defender in the battle, but also the mentor alone. Barbara, catching her gaze, confirmed a smile. Magotov's support pulled them out since the hardest times. The archer hoped that everyone would be aware of them later. Magoto covers them not only with armor, but also with wisdom from careless decisions. Suddenly, he solemnly put a trophy in front of the fire, a shiny bow and a sword. The eyes of the team shone when he announced, "Our gain has exceeded all expectations." Magoto, genuinely passionate, called his comrades closer to share a wonderful find. Weapons looked like a work of art, where sophistication was combined with a deadly threat. He explained that the sword is endowed with the unique skill of Plasma Blade, a terrible arms with a lightning attribute, so this relic is able to break the course of the hardest battle. Tsukichi only skeptically lifted his eyebrows. Barbara carefully inspected the trophy and, noticing Tsukichi's reaction, suggested that he accept the sword, because in the detachment, only he has a one-handed weapon. Confirming the decision, she turned to Misaki about Luke. but she noted that her silver bow was completely meeting her needs, so Magoto handed over a new bow Kiko. Kiko was in surprise, asking whether he could really use such a powerful weapon. Magoto agreed with a smile, and Tsukichi, having accepted the sword, promised to fully reveal his potential. But suddenly, Misaki noticed on the radar a red spot that was rapidly approaching. She grabbed and firmly ordered to prepare for battle. The threat was too great. Probably a wandering boss. Her confident voice drowned inner anxiety. Hearing about the danger, the detachment was straying. Incauses, aware of the seriousness, Cattle was silent. Tsukichi watched as the red marker fluttered to them. That was the boss of Uragate himself. This was a goblin shaman of the 12th level, a creature that even experienced trembling. Cold fear pierced Misaki, but she kept. The voices of doubt whistled about the defeat. But the Archidity gave her teeth. Exhaled and remembered the steel confidence of Theodore and heard, drawing power from them. She aligned her breathing, and fear retreated, inferior to solid focus. Her gaze became cold and prudent. It was then that the scream was cut down in a tense silence. Behind the Barbara was already materialized a shaman, whose eyes were burning with horrible light, and in his hands the curved blades were shining. Time slowed down. Misaki realized that she would not have time, and the heart squeezed from powerlessness. The darkness of the forest broke out when a shaman, like a stone, fell from above. Tsukichi grabbed a new sword without thought, adrenaline boiled in his veins. Barbara did not have time to bounce. He rushed forward, activating Plasma Blade. The blade flashed a blue flame, turning into a shining strip of metal. In a meager moment, the sword opened the armor of the shaman, knocking it out of the trajectory. Kiko, without being hiding, pulled the bowstring and released a double arrow. The first stuck in her shoulder, the second tore the side of the enemy. Cattle raised the rod. The crystal began a creepy purple. Silence skill twisted a shaman with a suffocating silence, depriving the opportunity to spell. Inokanta, having taken his breath, saw Barbara whole, but the attempt to shout something ended silently. Silence's action turned off all the sounds around the shaman. It all became clear. The spell of Cattle did not give the enemy a chance to activate magic, and therefore, their hurry saved the group. The shaman, having lost his voice and wounded, struck. The team felt that the initiative had passed to them. Magoto, lifting the shield loudly, how much silence allowed, he commanded a coordinated offensive, and the detachment, inspired by the first reflected attack, rushed to produce an immobilized boss. Goblin shaman rushed in a panic, whimpering silent words, devoid of magic. He became vulnerable, and Magoto, clasping his teeth, threw forward. His shield, though damaged, shone in the sunlight, a symbol of the team protection. With his sword raised, he walked as if every step was approaching the victory. Misaki noticed that the shaman's voice began to return. There was no time for reflection. She ordered Magoto to move away, and she had a bow of a silver bow, focusing all his strength. Activation of the Grime Rain skill caused the drainage of lightning arrows. The sky cut out flashes that destroyed the enemies before they had time to understand where the threat came. When the battlefield died down, Tsukichi, passionate about what he saw, exclaimed that it was a divine hit, and Misaki really deserves the title of Goddess of Silver Luke. The captured Tsukichi joyfully reported that he reached the 19th level, another step towards the dream of double swords. Kiko praised him, and Misaki, opening the menu, discovered her level 30. But her attention was attracted by Magoto, who stood away. His face was pale, breathing, intermittent. In the look, not fatigue was read, but oppression. Memories of attack on Barbara were not rest. Misaki came closer. She noticed that the boy's skin was blue, and he, in order not to worry others, assured that everything was fine. He convinced himself that it was simply the consequences of the battle, but other players also approached. They were disturbed by his condition. Magoto, with a stretched smile, lied that it was a problem with shoes, and advised the rest to go forward. Tsukichi asked if he came to the city himself, and Magoto nodded, although in her eyes he was uncertain. The group was going to go, but Misaki remained. She could not leave him. Going on, Magoto suddenly stopped. His breath broke down, his gaze was blurred. He lowered his eyes, apologizing for his weakness. He was ashamed that others were worried. Misaki sincerely confessed that she was more than once afraid, even before the battle was covered by anxiety, and understood his feelings. Her words were struck by Magoto. He never thought that such a strong, legendary Misaki feels like that. She sighed, saying that she got her strength not because of his skill, but through casual luck. She considered herself a beginner, and her glory was exaggerated. Magoto was struck and at the same time relieved. He first felt true affinity. Their steps were heard by the forest while Magoto shared history. At the very beginning of the game, he was frightened and confused, but rescued him, a cold-blooded tank, and that inspired him to become the same defender. But in the tunnels of Ilyana, everything went wrong. He tried to distract the goblins, using provocation skills, but instead of a triumph, heard a cry from the rear. One of the allies called him an idiot for the excessive use of man, which remained vulnerable. Then he was told for the first time, it was necessary to act together, not alone. On the day when the enemies were more than they could imagine, Magoto realized how fragile their world is. Dozens of goblins surrounded a detachment in a chaotic offensive. One of the goblins broke through and accidentally struck Magoto. But the other player, he flew with a painful moan. It became a point for a fracture. He realized that it was his mistake that caused a friend's injury. But unfortunately, there was no time. Another goblin had already taken a rusty sword just above his head. Directly from the fog of the battle, Alba came out. Like a hero of legends, on a white horse and a shining sword, he hit Goblin, throwing him away. Magoto shouted and promised to restrain his enemies. Thanks to him, all remained alive, but the wounded, exhausted players recovered for a long time, and when they returned, Goblin and followed. Magoto remembered how instead of thank the rescuer, he only substituted his comrades. His detachment broke up, the trust disappeared, and the sense of guilt became an unbearable burden. But he did not give up. He began to help beginners, teach, support. I saw the frightened beginners are getting tired, growing and becoming real allies. He realized that his place is not on the front line, but next to those who need a mentor. But the thoughts of water still did not leave the heart. Magoto suddenly apologized to Misaki. They say, she screamed. But she smiled gently and said she understands how important it is to speak sometimes. Her voice was confident and warm. She confessed that she once did not withstand pressure in battle, and understands his feeling perfectly. She told how Theodore became her mentor and taught endurance. Without him, she would not survive that first chaotic slaughter. Magoto listened with delight, and when she fell silent, apologizing that she may have said unnecessarily, he shook his head. Everything she said was important. The goal is not to survive, but to grow. He remembered how Sakichi changed. He had already started acting as a real defender. But Magoto knew, a long way ahead, and he had no right to throw the team, because their development was now his responsibility. Returning to the city, they saw the crowd on the square. Magoto asked what had happened, and Sakichi threw a smile that he had missed everything again. In the center stood a water, a hero and a symbol. His voice sounded over the crowd, announcing, the moon passed from the last invasion, and their efforts were not in vain. Ertor became safe again. The barriers are strengthened, costs are reduced, and for the first time, magic reserves have exceeded the needs. It is time to breathe relief. People shouted happily, but the following words were frozen in the air. Time to go on. The next goal is the Sandra Iron Castle. The crowd rose a noise. People did not expect it. They were used to rest. There were voices of disagreement, fear, indignation. One guy stated that only the Cross Guild defended them and created this world, and only she has the right to enjoy the results. But she remained calm. He recalled, peace is temporary. If the front loses, the darkness will cover the city. According to the mother, this world has an end. It is impossible to stay here forever. Returning home lies only through victory. His voice became passionate. Return, only through the struggle. And for that, everyone had to make a choice. Stand apart or go to the front. The crowd froze. Even the most urgent skeptics felt that the words of the water were echoing the truth. The tranquility of Aristorias is only a break before the greater battle. Everyone understood. The hero who saved the city does not stay here. His path where the fate of the world is decided. When the people diverged, Flyme announced, tomorrow at 8 a.m. the first advanced attack gathers before the guild. The set will last monthly. Misaki, standing next to Magoto, suddenly suggested quietly, join me. She has already decided to join the advanced detachment. Magoto was silently looking at her until he disappeared in the crowd. Barbara watched him, realizing that it was a moment of true choice. A soft silence prevailed in the shelter. Barbara smiled, noticing Sakichi and Cattle asleep at the table, and suggested that everyone finish the day. Misaki apologized that she was delayed, but Tiko assured, The evening was useful and warm. The team became closer. Suddenly, Barbara asked simply, "Are you really going to the front?" Misaki nodded, remembering her own powerlessness during the previous invasion. Barbara sighed. She wanted to invite Misaki to the 21st detachment, but now it is impossible. With her departure, there will be 4. Her words were touched by Magoto. Barbara assured that there would be 4 of them, because he would go forward. The outraged Magoto accused her of a drunken man, but Barbara calmly replied that the mind was clear and the decision was obvious. He did not believe. "Are you serious?" She nodded. Tiko and Misaki were silently watching the dispute. Barbara explained. She saw a determination in his gaze during his speech. "It is clear to all that Magoto is created for the front." The words knocked him out of the pantry, but she gently continued. "Level 36 and place in the top 10 speak for themselves." She recalled that he always sought to return to the front, the path to which one was decaying. Tiko supported her. "It hurts her to release the leader, but keeping it here means to restrain his potential." Barbara leaned, touched her chain, and opened the truth. Their equipment was not a trophy, but purchased by Magoto for their own money to strengthen the detachment. Kiko agitao. She was certain that everything was won in the battles. Barbara was just smiling, a too perfect set for accidental prey. Magoto, confused, exclaimed, "What are you without a tank?" The voice trembling anxiety. Barbara, while keeping calm, said, "Thanks to his teaching, they are no longer weak. Now their turn to prove that the lessons of the leader were not in vain." Heiko smiled through tears. She asked Magoto not to hesitate and to do what she really wanted. She knew that it was time to let him go, though the farewell in the heart was torn. Hearing these words, Magoto did not restrain his tears. Gratitude, sadness, and internal struggle were mixed in his chest. He apologized to everyone, recognizing how difficult it was to decide. Barbara silently hugged him from his back and whispered, "I had to say it." There was everything in this hug: farewell, tenderness, and peace. Heiko did not restrain the sob. Then everyone began to remember the common moments, laughed and joked. Even Misaki, who was silently watching, smiling, feeling the warmth of this unity. With the first light, those who were already gathered in response to the call of water. Barbara and Kiko, without spending time, handed Magoto the best gear. He tried to refuse, but their care did not know the limits. And in the guild, the bustle prevailed. Behind the counter, the girl greeted everyone with a smile. One of the warriors firmly stated that he was not going to change the specialization. Misaki approached the guild worker with the intention to move to the rank of Hermit Luchnitsa, a status that opened new horizons. This required the 30th level of the archer and the same level in throwing daggers. A few minutes later, turning away from the rack, Misaki noticed a familiar figure. Magoto stood nearby. Their views met. She greeted warmly. He smiled, proud of her. Meanwhile, Alba watched the area closely. People gathered more than he expected. He nodded to himself. Many answered the call of water. In the center of Water Square, he raised his hand, calling for silence. His confident voice was heard between buildings. He thanked everyone for his courage and announced that it was time to go to the path to the Iron Fortress. The elite of Guild went on a new journey. Ahead, dangers, unknown land, answers to questions that lived in every heart. The army of people was already moving, violating the silence of the ancient elven forests. The day that was to become a triumph turned into a tragedy. The music and light in the castle were crowned the princess, and the elves in lush dress were holding back indignation. The human invasion was already approaching. Bertrand, full of fear, broke into the hall. She shouted about the danger, but her voice broke down as she noticed strange spots on the skin of the house standing by the throne. The rage and curse fell from the mouth of the elves to the people, but no words could turn the lost. Bertrand woke up sharply, breathing hard, as if she had just snapped from deep water. She sat on a bed, lost in the dark room. Again, the same dream as the memories of the day when her world was destroyed. Near the floor, a little girl slept on the floor, the only thing left of the past and possibly hope for the future. They walked the broken halls of the once majestic castle. Each crack, each column sized the past. Bertrand noticed a bed, covered with fragments, and on it, seeds of no, a symbol of hope. She carefully took it in the palm of her hand, the last ray of light in the dark. It was Milana's bed. Her thoughts were cut off by a weak voice. A husband, pale, devastated, had lost his wife. Bertrand screamed, begged him not to give up. but in his gaze lived fatigue. He explained, "The curse is fed with despair, and he does not want to infect Vivian. If fate is to meet your beloved in another world, it is ready." Tears flowed from the eyes of Bertrand. She screamed that she would find the medicine, save him and everyone else. But at heart, she knew. There was almost no time left. 100 years have passed. The castle remained the same, ruins and silence. Bertrand is here again, already a witness of his own defeat. Her cries were lost in the void, and only her steps were heard in response. The old focusedly worked a triple blow. Each stroke of the blade was accompanied by heavy breathing and whistle of air. In vain that the workouts lasted for hours. The feeling of unity with the sword did not appear. Bertrand ordered in his ears, "Direct the thumb, pointing and look, and the technique will become perfect." She insisted on the sword, the extension of the body, not just iron, but every time lifting the blade, he felt only his weight. In another attempt he realized someone is approaching. The Elfian stepped to the sight. An old instinctively covered the face. Elves are rarely here and do not love people. She, stopping, noted that she was smelling differently, and asked who he was. In the course, he invented the name of Chutaro and transferred attention to Punyo. The mucus was lazy in the sun. The ELN smiled and introduced Vivian. Interested in Punyo, she cautiously took the mucus in the palm. An old allowed to touch, explaining that it was a biscuit mucus and a real cute creature. Vivian happily pushed Punyo and smiled in response, and noticed strange shadows on her skin. The lightness has changed anxiety. The pigmentation looked unnatural, as if the beginning of something evil. Meanwhile, Bertrand roared the corridors of the castle, calling Vivian. The girl disappeared, and the heart of the warrior squeezed against the evil anticipation. Bertrand froze near the training camp. Magical seal that she was guarding the gate for centuries was broken and darkened with debris. At that moment Vivian trembled, grabbing her head. An old rushed to her, but the girl was already moaning, as if under the authority of invisible pain. She exclaimed that people are unacceptable, and her skin darkened, covered with a pattern of the bark. In a moment there was a dark spirit tree with a vicious look. The mighty branch struck, and Punyo wrapped the old, forming a shield. At the same moment, Bertrand spent the monster, splitting the branch. The warrior appeared, like a thinker, and quickly became convinced that everything was fine with Chutaro, after which she focused on Vivian. Her heart is squeezed. Once a gentle Elfean is now roar, "People have to be destroyed." And again she rushed. The branch was collapsed. Punyo cracks under blows, and suddenly the spirit starred into the air, spreading the wings branches. Bertrand was cold. The creature was flying at random, but heading to the forest, to others to intensify. She realized that she was only a prologue of a great threat, and commanded the old one, "To the root of the great Nor. Only there the light is stronger than their shadow." Because the enemies sought Chutaro, and everything that happened just a veil before the battle, which was about to reach the whole Elfi region. Bertrand firmly decided to stay under the roots of the giant Noil. The night of darkness reinforced the enemies, and the dawn would weaken them. An old man still saw the bloody red pupils of the spirit before his eyes. Finally, in a trembling voice, he asked, "Were all the black trees they met once were elves?" Bertrand nodded silently. She sighed and repeated, "All this is a curse of people." An old man was hard to believe that his people were involved in such darkness. Bertrand told about the seeds of Nilil, a precious gift of a large tree that fought in the chest of every elf, giving magic and longevity. People with the power of stone began to hunt the elves, tear their hearts, and subsequently use black magic, torturing and resurrected by victims again and again. The light in the elves faded, and they became dark demons. An old could not comprehend that these monsters were once noble. Then Bertrand whispered about the sister. When the darkness absorbs, the light becomes unbearable. It leaves the body, leaving the shell for the shadow, old frozen. Vivian he had just seen. Sister Bertrand. The warrior continued that people had created a curse that exacerbated the despair of the elves. It feeds on regret, self-blame, and turns light souls into mad shadows that wandering in eternal darkness. The first victim was Queen Hatoya. People used to have a damn hardy explosive stone. At the coronation, when all the people were going to celebrate peace, the bomb spread the curse with a cloud that covered everyone. Since then, no elf will avoid darkness. Even Bertrand herself is doomed. But in her eyes the spirit of struggle burned. She warned Vivian did not return alone. The sky suddenly tightened the imperial darkness. The air became icy. In blackness, perfumes filled with despair and fierce hatred were thickened. Bertrand recognized the sister's silhouette, but the voice in her mind was scary of the terrible truth. The body of Vivian wears the raped soul of the Queen Gotha. The voice of mockingly thanked Bertrand for involuntary help and hinted that she would be useful, the curse of eternal. She was anger. She refused to get fate and gathered his freedom in the windmill. A deadly impulse that cuts away. The outbreak of energy escaped from the spear, cutting off a giant shadow. The air rang from voltage. Exclaiming that the enemy had to be weakened first, Bertrand ordered Punyo to help. The mucus rushed forward. Limulating with a soft glow, Punyo crashed into a monster, distracting it and biting a crumb of strength. A muffled roar of pain rolled across the valley. In response to the blows, a dark creature launched its power. A black, thick aura, like a living fabric, crawled all over, absorbing everything around. Bertrand felt a blessed light that always protected it. The cold pierced the body, paralyzing the movements, and before the eyes were no longer a sister Tivian, but a damn shell that wore the soul of the Queen of Gotha. The darkness was compacted. The legs got into the ground. The voice melted in adhesive darkness. She ordered Punyo to attack, and her own words were heard from afar. The ice flow, the forces were melted, and reaching out the trembling hand, she whispered to the old man, like the last salvation in the abyss. Suddenly, the warm palm responded with a compression, pulling it out of the dark boundlessness. An old man stood in front of her. Her eyes were determined, and a bright glow was pouring from the body, forcing the darkness to retreat. Looking just in her soul, he said, "These creatures are your people, and therefore mine, because I am your ruler." Gratitude and surprise broke out in the look of Bertrand when he mentioned Old. In his power to dispel the curse, as once in his native world saved the girl, he closed his eyes and summoned the system menu. The inscription Curse of the Dead shone on the screen, and confirmation of healing. Price, 1,773,000 podmel. Without hesitation of a second, he pressed yes. One thing was left in his thoughts: to save the people of Bertrand and her sister. The dazzling flash pouring all around. The light penetrated into each crack, and darkness, as a frightened shadow, cried and retreated.